अस्सलाम वालेकुम, आदाब। ये है वाव वर्चुअल पाकिस्तान 2021। आप पहुंच गए हैं वाव चेक इन पे और मैं हूं सानिया सईद। आज है 8 मार्च, ख़वातीन का आलमी दिन। सो हियर्स टू स्ट्रॉन्ग वुमेन। मे वी नो देम, मे वी बी देम एंड मे वी रेज देम। हैप्पी वुमेन्स डे। आज हम अपना डिजिटल म्यूरल वी आर वाव भी अनमास्क कर रहे हैं। प्लीज स्टिक अराउंड फॉर इट। बहुत सारे डिस्कशंस हैं, टॉक्स हैं रोज की तरह, लेकिन आज चंद एक बहुत खास भी हैं। एक ढोल और भंगड़ा परफॉर्मेंस है बाय इटर्नल ताल, और एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग परफॉर्मेंस है जिसमें सारी दुनिया से खवातीन ने कोलैबोरेट किया है। व्यू फ्रॉम हियर is an ensemble of stories, languages, and voices. It is a sonnet of distinct perspectives through a shared experience. हमें उम्मीद है कि आप हमारे ऐप्स वाव छोटू और एक खत तुम्हारे नाम चेक भी करते रहे होंगे और डाउनलोड भी किए होंगे। आज बच्चों के ऐप में एक स्पेशल एनिमेशन है हमारे पाकिस्तान की जो नोटेबल खवातीन हैं उनकी अचीवमेंट्स के बारे में। सो प्लीज डू चेक दैट वन आउट टू।
कपड़े धो रही थी। कपड़े धो के मैंने बाहर लाइन पर टांगे और अंदर किचन में गई। जब मैंने खिड़की के बाहर देखा तो एक बदतमीज बकरा मेरी शर्ट को ऐसे ऐसे करके चबाए जा रहा था। अम्मी अम्मी मैं जरा बाहर जा रहा हूँ। कहाँ जा रहे हो? पसंद नहीं आता हूँ। अपने बूट पहने, टोपी पहनी और बाहर बर्फ पड़ रही थी। There are monkey dads and monkey moms raising noisy monkey babies. There are toad families and toucan families and cotton top tamarind families too. और एक पत्थर के पीछे से लोमड़ी भी निकली। Assalamu alaikum. The bananas aren't fit to eat. They're disgusting. The lion, the king of beasts, decided to call an emergency meeting of all animals and birds. Now, the hare was the fastest animal in the forest, or so he thought. He could run so fast. He could jet like flash everywhere. In a second, he'd be from there to there. I'm the fastest animal in this forest. No one's been able to catch me yet, and no one can win a race from me. Nee, nee, nee.
ए शहर जनीन यक आलिम व बेजुबान जानदारी में तारीख नद्र पबी ब्रमशी जनीना पिचकंद गु मेहर सलामत बात एक आगत मजानी तर रास्ता वह दे मन तरा चसक दूर शतगु तो चम्मना बल्कि दिल ग्रान बे मलूटित तेरा बोगुशा पहले मना तुरसेत मजानी तो एच वड़ा मनी चारगा नहीं आए मां मुदाम तितराना कब तक वहदा तो मना गुश्तक भरे कदी और जनीनी आजाद बित सोच मारग मारिश्त पज्जार रंग जात वाब गिंदग बाल कनक
आमनक दी दादी के नाम खत। सलाम दादी, उम्मीद है आप ठीक और खुश होगी। आप बहुत याद आती है। आज का खत मैं सिर्फ उर्दू में लिखूंगी। दादी याद है आपने मुझे लफ्ज महूदगी के बारे में बताया था। कोविड के बाद ये लफ्ज मेरे जहन में घूमता रहता है। पता नहीं क्यों मुझे सब कुछ बेहुदा लगता है। भाई तो ये देख ले, स्कूल बंद होने के बाद मेरी तरह हर वक्त घर पे ही होता है। मुझे तंग करते रहते हैं, या सोते हैं या लैपटॉप पर काम के बहाने गेम्स खेलते रहते हैं। तो ब्रश भी नहीं करते, इतनी गंदी बू आती है। दादी, क्या मुंह से बू आना बेखुदी है? अगर नहीं तो भाई था और जिस्म तो खुजाना तो यकीनन बेखुदी है। उनकी जिस्म था कोई ऐसा हिस्सा नहीं है जो खुजाते ना हो। बाबा हरत गुस्से में रहते हैं। जब से उन्होंने ऑफिस का काम घर करना शुरू किया है, बस अल्लाह बचाए उनसे।
प्यारे ग्राहम, हैरान हूं जिंदगी के किस मोड़ पर तुम्हारी याद आई और बेतरह आई। 102 साल गुजर जाने के बाद झुर्रियों ज़दा जिस्म, राशा ज़दा हाथ, झुकी कमर, सफ़ेद बाल, मुद्दत गुजर चुकी, मुंह दांतों से खाली है। मैं जो तुम्हारे बिना जीने का तसव्वुर भी नहीं कर सकती थी, सारी जिंदगी गुजारती। और कभी ऐसा वक्त भी गुजरा कि तुम्हारा ख्याल तक ना आया। लेकिन अब 2020 ने तुम्हारी याद के समंदर में ऐसा धकेल दिया है कि जान कुनी का आलम है। जहन के दरीचों से तमाम मंजर झांक रहे हैं कि जैसे कल की बात है जब तुम्हारी मुझसे शादी तय हुई थी। मैं जागते हुए सपने देखती थी।
We have so enjoyed spending this time with you. talking about issues and stories close to our heart, ranging from indigenous cultures of Pakistan to the music that binds us. We have traveled through space and time together in the past 3 days. We have laughed and we have cried over achievements and hardships. We have taken account of how far we have come in acknowledging the importance of women and their contributions. We have talked about being the light for others in difficult times, especially those suffering from mental issues. We are the wow stars we talked about. Let us not doubt our light. Talking of shining light, today we have with us the true daughter of this Sohni Dharti, Malala Yousafzai, the youngest Nobel Award winner. She will be talking about girl-child education and the challenges faced in the past year. While we all do recognize that this pandemic has a hidden cost, what we do not recognize is how much of it is being borne by the women. After this talk by Malala, we have a reflective panel moderated by Jude Kelly, founder of the WOW Foundation. It is a reflective look on how this experience has shaped women and on WOW itself. We hope that you will take time with us to reflect on how the women are changing the world. With the WOW Star mural that will be unmasked at the last check-in, I would like to remind you that affirmation starts with self. When you reflect on this past year, think of talking to yourself as if you would talk to a dear friend, with kindness and grace. We cannot be the light if we refuse to believe we shine. Happy Women's Day, everybody. Be the woman you want to see at every step in the world. जैसे जैसे हम डिजिटल मीडिया का इस्तेमाल बढ़ाते जा रहे हैं, इसका इस्तेमाल ज़्यादा कर रहे हैं, डिजिटल एनवायरनमेंट में अफराद के साथ, ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के साथ इंटरैक्ट कर रहे हैं, मेल मिलाप बढ़ा रहे हैं, वैसे वैसे हमें ज़्यादा विजिलेंट भी रहने की ज़रूरत है. हमारे लिए ये जानना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि हमारे डिजिटल हुकूक क्या हैं और अगर कोई इन हुकूक को पामाल करता है तो हमें क्या एक्शन लेना चाहिए या हम क्या एक्शन ले सकते हैं, क्या एहतियातें हमें करनी ज़रूरी हैं. आगे आने वाले पैगामात आपके लिए बहुत अहम हो सकते हैं. हम हैं वाव वर्चुअल पाकिस्तान 2021 और हम तमाम ही सोशल मीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे मौजूद हैं. आप हमें वहाँ देख सकते हैं. यूट्यूब पे हम हैं वाव पाकिस्तान वर्चुअल, इंस्टाग्राम पे wow.pakistan, फेसबुक इवेंट पेज है हमारा वाव वर्चुअल पीके 2021 और हमारा फेस्टिवल ऐप है wowvirtual.pk. हमारे 2 ऐप्स हैं छोटू और एक खत तुम्हारे नाम.
My name is Kate Ewart-Biggs, and I'm the Interim Chief Executive of the British Council. On behalf of Women of the World Foundation Council, I'd like to welcome you all to this discussion today. It's such an honour to be talking to Malala Yousafzai, the youngest ever recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, a brave and passionate campaigner for girls' education, and a highly visible symbol of girls' empowerment worldwide. I'm also speaking to Dr. Maliha Khan, Chief Programme Officer for the Malala Fund, an advocate for women's empowerment and social justice, and she'll be telling us about how the fund operates around the world. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Shukriya. Thank you.
Shukriya, thank you.
Our discussion is part of the WOW Virtual Pakistan 2021, and of course, it's taking place on International Women's Day. There's never been a better time for debating the challenges faced by girls and young women, and how to get to a world that is fairer, safer, and better educated for everybody. That's the goal the British Council and the Malala Fund share through our programmes around the world. This year, it feels as if we're at a real turning point in history. It's a moment of very testing challenges, but also, I think, of great opportunity for this generation of young women. This really matters to me personally, because I'm a female leader in an organisation that's had a man at its head for all of its previous 86 years, until now, when we have both a female CEO and a female chair. It also matters to me because I'm the mother of a teenage daughter, and the two of us have had plenty of time during the various UK lockdowns to think and talk about her ambitions for the future and what today's world looks like to girls like her. One place where the debate on women's rights and their place in society is most intense is, of course, Pakistan, where Malala, you began your campaigning work for girls' right to education. I'd like us to reflect on the state of that debate and the progress that's being made in Pakistan and elsewhere over the next half an hour. So Malala, starting with you, I'd like to talk about leadership. Two of the world's most visible and effective campaigners on big social issues, yourself and the environmental campaigner Greta Thunberg, are both young women. You both began to have an impact on global debates while you were young schoolgirls. Do you think there's something special about the leadership offered by young women? Something that connects with people in a different way, perhaps?
I think it's not just Greta and Malala. There are so many young girls and women out there who want to see a change in the world, who care about the climate, who care about women's rights and equality, who want to reduce poverty and want to see an equal place for everyone, especially women and people from minority groups. And there are, I think, a few things which we recognize. I think the first is that women before us have worked really hard for us to have equal place where we are right now, getting access to education, having the right to vote, and so many other things, getting a place at political positions and getting a place in the parliament. All of these things, women before us have done that for us, and we want to make sure that we continue that activism for the future generation of our world, and ensure that the girls who will be following us will have a space where they can get access to opportunities, where they can have the right to education, where no girl is left behind. And I think the second thing is that that girls, when they get their education, once they are aware and once they know what is wrong with society, they want to act and they want to bring change. For us, it does not make sense that we continue living in an unequal society. Why is it that there are 130 million girls still out of school? Why is it that our leaders are not taking action for climate change, when we can see the figures and stats telling us that we will not be safe if we continue with the current work that we have set, and that we need to change things. Otherwise, there are floods and droughts, and there are these catastrophic impacts of climate change that affects people, especially from poorer backgrounds, from low-income backgrounds, from low-income economies and countries, and then it affects girls and women, especially. The recent research that Malala Fund conducted, it shows us the relationship between gender equality, girls' education, and climate change, and it shows us that that the people who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change are women and girls, especially from low income backgrounds. But also, if we want to challenge that, and if we want to change the impact of climate change as we are seeing right now, then we have to invest in girls' education and ensure that girls get the quality education that they need, in the decisions that they make, the places that they get, the opportunities that then they get. They all play a key role in reducing the impacts of climate change.
Thanks very much, Malala. I mean, I completely agree with that, and it's so fantastic to have, you know, this new generation, as you say, sort of walking in the footsteps of old generations, but, you know, approaching it in the new way of the new order. It would be great, turning to you, Maliha, to understand a little bit more about the kinds of programs that you run around the world to kind of address some of the barriers that I think young women still face in the world.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to add, and I think Malala was too modest to add that. I think the reason why there's such a resonance with what she's saying and what Greta is saying is because they are speaking for themselves. Too often we have world leaders and we don't resonate with them because they're at a place where it's not a personal relationship. Whereas I think when someone whose rights are being affected directly, and you know someone who's vulnerable, when they speak up for their own rights, then you know that it's a very important thing to hear, and it strikes so much truer than when technical experts or political heads talk about the same thing. And I think that's really important, and that's also then the basis of our work in the world. We work with people who are activists and advocates and experts on girls' education, who are working in their own national context, in their own local context, who understand those well and who connect with the communities directly, and we support them in what they come to us for. So we identify interesting topics that they're working on, we support them with funding, we support them with capacity building and networking, because we feel that that's the best investment we can make in the long term, that they can then continue to be there long after we've left, with their own skill sets, their voice, and their platforms built up with a little bit of our help, but more from their own networking with each other. And I think that's the best thing that investment we can make in the long term, because whatever new challenges will come up, whatever new solutions will come up, they will be there advocating for it and trying to push it. And that's the best thing we can do.
Thank you very much. I mean, it would be great if we have time in this next half an hour to hear a little bit more about that. But just following on from that, Malala, you know, you've spoken a lot about your father being a really major inspiration to you, you know, and his passionate belief in girls' education. What role could other men who might be listening in today play in supporting equal education for girls? What's their role, do you think?
So I always remind people that I am here and I am able to speak out, and I'm able to continue my education and then recently graduate from Oxford. I am here because I had parents who believed in me and who allowed me to continue this journey. Even in Swat Valley, when we were speaking out about girls' education and against extremism, there were so many other girls as well who wanted to speak out. But their parents, their fathers, their brothers stopped them from speaking out. And what's different in my story is that my father did not stop me. That's the only thing that's different. So, I'm just an ordinary girl. It's my parents who are extraordinary, especially my father, because he was there standing by me, and he was challenging everybody else in community because they were putting a lot of pressure on him, but he did not listen to them and reminded them that it is none of their business and a girl can make her own decisions herself. And men and boys and fathers, sons, brothers, they have such an important role to play in our fight for equality, because That's where the issue lies. Mostly, it's in the behavior, in the work that men do, and sometimes, we want men to take action to stand with women, by women, but also sometimes it's the inaction as well that can be helpful. It's giving space to women. It is giving room to women so women can have space at the table. They can have space in that room where decisions are made about their future, about their lives, about their bodies. So we cannot underestimate the role that men are carrying. And I always ask myself, before changing the world and before talking about feminism outside, what is the situation in your own house? And I always think about my own brothers and my father and my own family. And are we doing enough or not? And I make sure that they respect me, they value me, and they understand what equality means. So even if we can't change the rest of the world, at least we can work in our own houses. So if you are a man or a woman, let's look at ourselves and let's look at our own house and see how we are ensuring that we play our role in this fight for equality. Individual decisions can have such a huge impact. If my father had decided not to allow me to speak, I would not have been here. If my brother had decided that he was going to, stop me from going outside, I would not have been here. Not that he can, it's impossible, but just saying that this does happen in many places. And I have made sure that I always stay as a strong woman in the house, because you have to make that place for yourself and you have to have that voice for yourself. So be strong and be brave. That's what I say to all women, and also to men. Be strong and brave and stand with women. That's what bravery is. That's what courage is for men as well. Add that to the ego bit, that you stand with women and be proud to be feminists.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, Maliha, have you got anything to add to that from your perspective?
I would not try to add to what Malala just said. Thanks. 100% agree with her.
Fantastic. It's really, so for both of you, and maybe we'll start with you, Maliha, the issues of education and women's rights, obviously very, very different in different contexts. They are, my daughter's access to education here in the UK is very different to, I'm sure, a young girl's access in a place like Pakistan. So how do we engage all women in a kind of global movement? What's your approach to that, the Malala Fund? Do we need to inspire at national, at regional, at local movements? How do we create this, this kind of campaign globally so that it's really effective to really galvanize the power of young women all over the world?
I think that's really, really important. Making sure that the voices of the people is heard. I always say that education is a basic right of every citizen in the world. And that means that it's the responsibility of every government in the world to provide its citizens, all citizens, girls are citizens just as much as anyone else is, with that right. And so the global movement of speaking up about that, making sure that governments are investing in education finance. We need to keep putting money into it. It's particularly in this time of a pandemic when government incomes are coming down, when there's so many other priorities. Governments are already lifting their eyes from their responsibilities and the commitments that they've made. If I could be so bold as to say, the UK government has just reneged on its promises of 0.7% and its promises that it made on so many priority areas. And I think this is a really important time to remind the governments of the long-term impact of lifting away from those commitments. But it's also, I think, the demand side from citizens to make sure that they are asking their governments to provide good, quality, safe, gender transformative education. That kind of pressure is what governments respond to from their citizens. And I think that's something that no matter where you're sitting, that can be a voice. You can be a voice to that movement. You can pressure your local politicians or your local representatives, and you can speak up and join. We've got a number of resources on our website. Assembly is one of our sort of digital things that we put out, particularly for young people, of how to engage, hearing stories about different things. But there's a number of local organizations. I'm sure everybody can find them in their own contexts. and giving support to them, adding your voice to them, being one of the advocates that says, we're not going to accept the status quo because as citizens we deserve more. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, Malika. We have a program at the British Council, Active Citizens, which works with young people to get them to engage with the social issues around them and giving them the skills to be able to navigate whatever environment it is that they're facing, whether they're in Syria or whether they're in Pakistan or the UK. And I think that the kind of skills that young women in particular need to find the voice that they need in order to influence, a voice that you found very early, Malala. But have you got anything to add to what Malika said in terms of, how we create this kind of global campaign for young women around the world?
I think the campaign has started. It has been going on for a long time, and we are where we are because of the campaign that many women have done, many men have led as well, and I think it should keep going. We need to remind people how urgent this issue is, and education is not just, when a girl loses access to education, it's not just one small opportunity. It is about her future as well. Many girls are forced into early child marriages. Many girls lose out on the opportunity of getting a job, and these girls are then dependent on their families, on male family members. They do not even know about their rights. They do not even know where to find safety and protection. They do not even know what their body rights are. So all of these things then have a huge impact on a girl, on her future, on her safety. And not just that, it has an impact on the world economy as well, because when girls are not in school, the world economy is losing. We are losing on jobs, we are losing on opportunities that we can create for each other. We are losing on voices that are very much needed on the table. Women's voices are lacking, then it affects how the policies that are made and how that further impacts the women's lives as well. And oftentimes we see that, in parliaments, in offices, it's all men sitting together around a table and they're making decisions about women's bodies and women's future and their jobs. So it's important that we have women there and we have women's voices there, and education uplifts women to have that place, to have that role, to have access to these opportunities. So we cannot underestimate the power that education holds. But also with education comes so many opportunities. It helps women individually, but also helps our community and society as well. And there are so many researches that have been done that shows us that when you invest in girls' education, you reduce the likelihood of wars, you help tackle the climate change issue, you improve the lives of these women, their health, you improve the conditions of the health of their families, and you also to know that they initially made commitment towards primary education. Quality, safe, and free education. So narrative changes, you raise more awareness and people start talking about it, and then you influence policies as well. So we have to keep going. We have to keep the conversation going and make things happen.
Thanks very much, Malala. And we've been talking about the world, but I'm very aware that girls in Pakistan face very particular challenges. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and what you would tell a young girl in Pakistan today, given that we are at WOW Pakistan today?
there are so many factors that are preventing girls from school. There are social norms, there are wars and conflicts, and that is a very big issue. There is displacement, refugees. I think up to 79 to 80 million people are displaced. And when you are in a refugee camp, you do not have access to equal education. And there's lack of infrastructure. So there are not enough schools in your village. There's transport issues. You cannot travel to the school. It's too long. Or you have to fetch water for your family. You have to take care of the family. You have to, and even if your parents can afford, they decided to prioritize the boys' education and not yours. So this is the life of a girl. She's facing all these barriers. And for me, I was really lucky that my father believed in my education. I was literally like the first one in my family that has now completed her university education. But my father, he saw that his own 5 sisters could not get their education just because they were women. There was nothing else different in their story. And my father and his brother could complete their education because they were boys and men. And all of his sisters were married off at early ages. So he wanted to see it very differently when it came to his daughter and his sons. He wanted them to have equal rights and opportunities. And he knew that education is an equalizer, and education will allow his daughter to have opportunities in her life. So I was getting my education, but things changed in Swat Valley back in from 2007 till 2009 when terrorism started. There were bombings, and more than 400 schools were destroyed. Taliban announced that girls' education was banned. Women were stopped going to markets, and we also became internally displaced for 3 months. In 2009, there were military operations happening. There were, there would be firing, and there would be bomb attacks, and all of those things. We lived in that for 2 years, and that impacted my education and the education of girls in Swat. And that's when I started speaking out, because I could not see my future without education. I knew that just like every other girl, I will be forced into early child marriages, or I will not be able to become a doctor, teacher, or engineer, or whatever I want to do in my life. I would be kept limited to the 4 walls of a house, and I will not be able to simply have that identity of being a woman, making decisions on my own, and just not be, dependent on others and other people making decisions about my life and what should be happening to my body and who I should be marrying and when I should be having kids and all of so many things. So I did not want that, and that's why for me it was so important to speak out. And in Pakistan, this is the life of so many girls as well. And I'll pass it to Maliha to talk more about the situation about girls' education right now in Pakistan and how this pandemic has affected it especially.
Please do, Maliha. Yes, that would be great to hear.
Absolutely. It's been a global pandemic, and we've seen a tremendous amount of impact on girls across the world. As you know, we did some research at Malala Fund at the start of the pandemic that was based on our experiences with the Ebola crisis in West Africa. And we estimated that there'll be 20 million additional girls that might drop out of school because of the closures. Unfortunately, the worst has come true. The pandemic has stayed on for much longer than even we thought back then, and we've seen school closures at a scale and at a length that the world has not seen for a very, very long time, or ever in the history of the world. And that has had tremendous impacts. When you think about many of these girls, particularly in Pakistan, their total schooling is 5, 6, 7 years. You take a whole year out of that. They don't have that much schooling left. And we also know that, one of the main reasons why children in general drop out, but particularly girls drop out, is if the parents don't feel they're learning in school and they're not performing well. And so if they're not getting a quality education, the parents kind of say, well, why is she going to school? Why are we wasting her time? Why are we wasting our money? And they pull her out much sooner than they pull boys out. And so we really fear what is going to be the implications of the pandemic on girls. The other thing we found is that during the time of the closure, 90% of parents reported that they did not receive any support or any resources to continue the education of their children at home. And that girls, even the ones that did receive some support, had so much more chores and work to do at home that was preventing them from continuing, at least, retaining some learning. So if we remember back to, say, when we used to get summer vacations, how much we forgot in just those 2-3 months of being out of school, and what these children must now be experiencing, particularly the girls, who don't have time to even, read their school books, to do their homework, because they're, 5, 6, 7, even up to 9 times more likely to have to do chores at home than the boys do. There's going to be a strong, I think, backlash that the girls are going to face. They're going to fall far behind, and that's something that we can't afford to lose, these decades of progress that we've made. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I do want to add here, because we're speaking to a Pakistani audience, we have made tremendous amounts of progress in Pakistan. There's things here, the numbers of universities, the number or the percentage of girls at the university level is fast increasing. We've seen girls enter into professions and do things, become pilots, go into the police force, do all sorts of firsts in Pakistan that at least when I was growing up, we didn't see. I'm aging myself here. I'm not in Malala's generation. And I think that's really important to acknowledge and celebrate as a country also. But at the same time, as we do that, it's also important to realize and understand that there's so much more we could be doing, and to continue with that determination to do what we need to do to make sure that every single last child in Pakistan, particularly every single last girl, gets that quality of education.
I mean, absolutely. And do you think perhaps, staying with the pandemic, that there are some positive things that may come out of the way that we've watched and, seen the heroes in many countries of the pandemic have been women, the nurses in many countries, the teachers, the carers, and in many countries where we've had female leaders actually seeing it, the pandemic, being very well dealt with. Do you think perhaps there's something we could build on globally around, a slightly different look on the achievement of many, many women in different sectors that has been more celebrated in many countries? Do you think that's something to build on?
I think at the times of crisis, women are always at the forefront, and they are, responsible and active in making sure that the most vulnerable are protected and safe. And we see that at the political leaders level, we are seeing how women have handled this COVID crisis. And women, countries with women presidents and prime ministers have done much better. We also see that, at homes and in local communities as well, women take care of their families, they make sure everybody is safe and healthy, and they are just more aware of the social responsibility that they have, and they're more responsible. And I think research shows that to us. But also when women and girls are educated, when they are independent, when they have the resources, they can do much more. So education can further empower women and provide them with the opportunities that they need to play a crucial role in ensuring that we create a safe, equal, greener and freer world for everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, I could go on this conversation all day with you both. It's been such an absolute pleasure. But I wonder if we could just have a few sort of parting words from both of you, and perhaps some of those in Urdu for the great audience that we have out there in Pakistan today. I'm afraid I can't contribute in Urdu, I'm afraid. So I will hand that over to Maliha and then back to Malala to end us. Maliha.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया केट, और बहुत शुक्रिया वाव पाकिस्तान. आप सबसे बात करके बहुत अच्छा लगा है, और इंशाल्लाह हम देखेंगे कि हमारे मुल्क में अभी हम बुरे वक्त से गुजर रहे हैं, लेकिन आगे अच्छा वक्त आएगा, क्योंकि हम सारे कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि हमारी मुल्क की सारी बच्चियां जो हैं पढ़ सकें और आगे अपनी पूरी जिम्मेदारी निभा सकें अच्छे सिटीजन्स की तरह. शुक्रिया.
और मैं भी मलिहा से मुकम्मल इत्तेफाक करती हूँ. हमको अपनी जिम्मेदारी निभाना चाहिए, और इसमें ना सिर्फ ये बात सिर्फ ख़वातीन और लड़कियों के लिए नहीं है, बल्कि लड़कों और मर्दों के लिए भी है। आपका एक बहुत अहम किरदार है कि आप ख़वातीन के लिए खड़े हो, आप उनके हुकूक के लिए बात करें, आप उनको आगे आने दें, उनको काम करने दें, और आप इस बात पर फ़ख्र करें कि आप फेमिनिस्ट हैं और आप ख़वातीन के साथ खड़े हैं। और इंशाल्लाह हम एक ऐसा पाकिस्तान बनाएंगे जहाँ पर हर बच्ची स्कूल जा पाएगी, वो अपना तालीम मुकम्मल कर पाएगी, और हर खातून को उनके मुकम्मल हकूक़ हासिल हो। और ये हमारे कल्चर का, ये हमारे मज़हब का और ये हमारे आईन का पैगाम है कि हर एक पाकिस्तानी का ये हक़ है कि वो तालीम हासिल करे, वो अपने ख्वाब पूरे करे और वो इस मुल्क की खिदमत करे। और हर एक इंसान जो है ना, वो इसमें अपना किरदार अदा कर सकता है। तो मैं तमाम ख़वातीन से कहूँगी कि आप किसी से न डरें, आप अपनी आवाज़ उठाएँ, अपने हकूक़ के बारे में जानें कि आपके क्या हकूक़ है, क्या चीज़ें लोग आपको बता सकते हैं और क्या नहीं बता सकते, और व्हाट आर द थिंग्स दैट आर ओके एंड नॉट ओके। तो ये जानना बहुत ज़रूरी है। तो आप तालीम हासिल करें अपनी, आप अपने हकूक़ के बारे में जानें, और आप पाकिस्तान में जो तब्दीली देखना चाहते हैं, उसको ले आएँ।
Thank you so much, both of you, on behalf of WOW Pakistan and the British Council. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and I really hope all of you out there who are listening to this are celebrating International Women's Day, and let's carry on the good fight together around the world. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Pakistan Zindabad.
Pakistan Zindabad.
Hello and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Natasha Nurani. I am a musician, a music curator, and an ethnomusicologist from Lahore, Pakistan. It's an honor to be a part of the Women of the World Festival for 2021. Today, I'm going to be speaking to you about something that I enjoy daydreaming about quite a lot, which is imagining a future for women in the Pakistani music ecosystem. For those that may not be familiar with the ecosystem of Pakistan, it's mostly run by commercial ventures which fund music. There are no record labels to write home about, and there are very few spaces in terms of concert spaces or accessible studio spaces that exist to the public at large. The role of women within that is also further kind of diminished for multiple reasons, including kind of society frowning upon women in such spaces or in such roles for a multitude of reasons. And currently, what the mainstream had been like until maybe 5 or 6 years ago was very few women in pop music and even fewer women in different genres such as rock and rap. But thankfully, that's changed quite rapidly over the past 5-10 years. You've got some wonderful women at the forefront, including Hania Aslam, Zara Paracha, and Natasha Humera Ijaz, all of whom are excellent musicians and phenomenal producers, and just excellent guidelines for how women can kind of play a massive role in changing and developing the sound and the culture of music in Pakistan. I mean, primarily these are women who have really kind of tackled a male-dominated, male-oriented space to pave the way for themselves, and they've done it quite with like grace and elegance and poise and phenomenal music within that. The great thing to have seen in the past 5-6 years is also younger women, women between the ages of say 15 and 30 coming up with new ways to kind of make music or find ways to learn music. There are a lot more female musicians than previously before. Usually women would be stuck within the trope of just being singers and very rarely would be seen on the mixer or in the studio as a part of the team. And a lot of the women that I've mentioned and many more have changed that. You see more female session musicians, you see a lot more women producing other women, and that's been like a wonderful change. To speak from my own experience in terms of what hurdles one might face coming into the music industry as a woman in Pakistan is, first and foremost, there's no kind of way, there's no map to follow, there's no ladder to seek in terms of developing a skill set. Music is not a part of the education system in Pakistan, so it's something that you have to actively go out of your way to learn. Gear and instruments are not accessible or affordable. It's gotten better in recent times, but growing up, it definitely was very difficult getting your hands on a guitar or a piano, or something that would actually help the learning process as opposed to hinder it. That paired with the fact that a lot of the access that one would have to listening to music or getting inspired or learning more music would be to go to different spaces, like to go to gigs, very simply. And in the 90s and 2000s, and currently to a larger degree, concert spaces and entertainment spaces are not necessarily safe spaces for women to attend or to be present in, just primarily because of the fact that the ratio and the way that these events had been marketed, or the kind of audiences that these events hope to amass, really didn't consider how young girls and women would play into the audience and would just be clumped together in a family enclosure, which means that you need to come with a set of people. So the thought of a young girl attending a concert in the evening alone was and is largely still unacceptable to society, and these spaces aren't designed for that. So just even seeking inspiration, or just finding new music, or just understanding that maybe performing live or doing live sound or being in a studio would be a reality that definitely that seemed like a far-fetched dream. I was very lucky to be surrounded by people who opened up their musical spaces to me, and to have absorbed and consumed a lot of Pakistani music and international music thanks to technology. So that really kind of made things a lot easier in terms of deciding and kind of acknowledging that music is something that I would like to pursue, and of course study for that very reason. It's also very difficult still, definitely a lot more earlier on, to kind of fight societal pressure to not be a woman pursuing music, because the connotations of women pursuing music from the pre-partition era, 18th century onwards, just kind of started deteriorating, and that really seeped into society in a way that has been hard to shake off, but not impossible, because as I mentioned, there are just a lot of women who are really, really just kind of trailblazing through setting examples through their work. But that wasn't necessarily true. It was either you could be one type of the female artist, which was to no fault of the women, to be token women in a song, or to be something to be objectified, and also primarily to be singers, because playing an instrument or being a producer was never really, and is still kind of laughed at. And that's something that's really been wonderful to see a difference in, with younger women picking up instruments and being valued for the kind of craft and the craftsmanship they have and the skills that they've developed. Permission to access studio spaces is also something that really didn't resonate with a lot of people, in terms of these studio spaces being largely male dominated, having work hours that were not flexible, working late nights at in spaces that didn't really have many like an understanding of what it would be like to be a young girl in that space. I was lucky to have encountered various musicians who created that kind of environment for me, or at least tried to the best of their ability. And I am very aware of the fact that not everyone gets that. It is something that comes with privilege. It's something that comes with capital. It's something that comes with a lot of luck in a way as well. But I think now the wonderful thing and the kind of future to imagine is that women no longer have to play this kind of gimmicky role. They don't have to um, kind of be a certain set type of female artist that Pakistan might be used to. And in doing so, I feel like there are some action points that the community that has been, you know, kind of nurtured and developed over the past, say, decade, with women supporting women across within music and outside of music in terms of production, filmmaking, art, artwork development, and things like that. It's become a lot more fuller and a lot more lush. But I do see a lot of young, you know, girls wanting to enter the field and being so confused because you have to really work twice as hard to stand out or to really prove your worth, because it's very easy for you to get replaced with someone who can just work longer longer hours, or you know, just people. It's just more convenient for people to not have to consider those things. So you just end up missing out on opportunities, especially if you're not willing to compromise on certain things or you have certain restrictions. So it's just, you know, that's usually used as an excuse for, oh, okay, you know, we don't want to hire a woman in the field. So whether it's production management, whether it's curation, whether it's research, whether it's production and music making itself, the few tangible ways forward that I feel would benefit the community is to develop a lot more female-oriented spaces that cater to more women teaching other women without the kind of patronizing angle, or without, you know, kind of using a woman in a band or in a room or in a studio space as a token to push forward. It isn't meant to be an agenda. It's meant to be something that equalizes opportunity, because talent is like endless when it comes to these young women. And it's so inspiring to kind of draw inspiration from people who are just picking up an instrument and you know, picking up a craft and taking that forward. So to be able to take these young women, you know, and put them in positions where they can understand what management looks like, or see that there are a few steps in terms of the kind of things, the skills that you need to acquire during school and college, and what to do after that, and institutions and spaces that open up their doors to provide more access for these women. I think that's such an important step to do, and a lot of this in previous years has been done through viewing women who are leading by example, and just, you know, going to yourself and being like, okay, this is possible, this is something that I can actually consider, because just by virtue of seeing another woman in that role or another woman in that room, you feel like you could also have a place at the table. It is also important to really kind of construct learning spaces that may not necessarily tie into your standard education system, but do enable more women to pick up skills that they may have avoided previously, or may have been kind of brushed off with in their desire to want to learn. And that does come from, as I mentioned, creating safer spaces that are led by women. I feel that a lot of the work that Zara Paracha and I did for developing the Lahore Music Meet, an annual music festival, as a property, as a space, was to, you know, just consider what we would like, or what we would have liked growing up, or the kind of examples or the kind of musicians and artists and skills that we would like to have developed growing up, or somebody just telling us that, you know, this is the syllabus that you need to follow, something even as basic as that. And more so having ears that are non-judgmental, willing to hear us out at various stages, at picking up instruments, at kind of wanting to have many questions about entering the industry and not just having to do guesswork. And I think a lot of what 1960s and 70s Pakistani music and Pakistan's music ecosystem looked like is very excellent to look at as a precedent for what Pakistan's industry can look like in itself. artists like Nahid Akhtar managed to just completely traverse any kind, like she just did not let herself get boxed into any genre. And that's someone that I like to draw a lot of inspiration from, because she didn't choose just a certain type of music or kind of lock in a certain type of genre or fit a trope. She did everything. And I think that outlook, and to have seen that in some version of Pakistan's music industry, is something that I really kind of cling on to for inspiration. And I feel that the more we study and celebrate the women that have kind of established what the Pakistani sound has been in the past, we'll be able to empower the Pakistani women of the present and future to be able to do that. So, I mean, whatever you're imagining for women in Pakistan's music ecosystem, share that far and wide. Reach out to women, tell them, let them know the exceptional work that they're doing, because there are plenty of people kind of putting them down. And I feel like any opportunity that we all get to garner a sense of community and give back, and clear the space and clear way for more women to enter, I feel like that really is the perfect daydream to constantly have, that I really hope to see become more of a reality in the near future. Thank you so much for your time. I'd love to hear your thoughts at any point.
I'm Jude Kelly. Welcome. I founded WOW, Women of the World, 11 years ago, and I did it on International Women's Day. And I did it because 11 years ago, I was concerned that women, and particularly young women, were not aware of the incredible history of struggle and change that had made such a difference to women all over the world. And the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day, as I celebrated it 11 years ago, was my effort to say, look, the struggle's still on. There's so much to do still. Let's join hands across the world and recognize that and do something about it. And of course, something about it has been being done for many, many years since then, in all kinds of extraordinary ways. And one contribution is that WOW has become a global movement. And as we can see from WOW Pakistan, the range of voices, thoughts, ideas are something to celebrate. And WOW is really a place of celebration. We want to demonstrate the magnificence of achievements of girls, women, trans and non-binary people everywhere, as they reach out to say equality is a matter of human justice, human right, and also what an amazing world it will be when we are equal. And I say when, not if, because I think unless we together have this idea of absolute faith that this change will happen, then we can't find the momentum and the stamina to keep going. And I do believe that stamina relies a lot on optimism, and optimism comes from hearing wonderful stories of resilience, stories of survival, but also stories of just great happy chance, all the things that women have always dreamt about, and when those opportunities come for their dreams to come true. So this particular WOW moment, we're not only joined in Pakistan, but we have at the moment WOW in Turkey, in Istanbul, in New York, in Bangladesh, they're doing think-ins, in Taiwan, they're doing think-ins. We've got WOWs in Australia, in Rio. So it's a really extraordinary world movement that we hope, as you're watching this, that you'll join. I'm hosting this final panel for this marvelous festival. It's been a period of great richness and great contrast and all the things that you want a WOW festival to be, but of course, not live, online, which we'll be talking about in a minute. And I have here a tremendous group of guests. I'm going to introduce them as I ask them questions. We together are going to be thinking about the future for women and girls during pandemic, post-pandemic, and perhaps a longer journey than that in terms of the dreams that we have for them and each other. So let me start by introducing Salima Hashmi, who is an artist, curator, and contemporary art historian. In fact, her book, Unveiling the Visible, Lives and Works of Women Artists of Pakistan, was really quite a groundbreaking peace. And I suppose in some way relates to the theme of this festival about unmasking, because it really laid bare both the creative juice and the determination of the lives of the women of Pakistan who chose to be artists. Salima, you've founded many organizations, you've led many institutions. I'm an artist too, and in my lifetime, I have never seen the arts that we rely on for stories to be so pushed back out of public space, out of the limelight, out of an economy that it relies on, since most people who are working in the arts are freelance. So tell me what you think the arts has been able to do during the pandemic, and also what fears you have for it at the moment.
Well, I think one of the things that this pandemic has done is that it's given us the time for self-reflection, and also of thinking back at the struggle of women, and then thinking, okay, so how can we use that and make it our strength as we go forward? One of the things that I have, well, going back in my memory, I've looked at women's struggle for peace in our region. I mean, I was a 4-year-old child when 1947 happened and the massacres were taking place. And my mother had brought me and my baby sister to Murree on our way back to Lahore. And there had been a lot of bloodletting then. So the women in Murree got together and they decided to take out a demonstration for peace. And 4 years old, I was put on a donkey, the donkey rides type donkey in this hill station. I was given a white flag to carry, and I led that demonstration. And I've kind of not let that white flag go down ever. And I have been there, and I'm happy to say, you mentioned the book. I think that women in Pakistan have been in the forefront at very difficult moments, like the pandemic. And I have seen that, you know, while I've been looking back at history, looking back at the women's movement in the time of the dictator Ziaul Haq, and how when all the political parties were silenced, it was a women's movement that took off. And it was women artists who were very much in the forefront. It was their work when they decided, okay, we're not going to do state-sanctioned art. We're not going to paint pretty landscapes or do calligraphy, which was being demanded. We're going to do other things, which they did. My own work was about the female form and about taking off the clothes and saying, okay, this is the body and this is what we are forbidden to do. So this is what we are going to do. We're going to talk about the measures which are the state taking over the right of the body, and so on and so forth. I think certain similar things have happened during the pandemic, when in fact it's been very difficult to make work, it's been very difficult to show work. I've been really, I've been so inspired by the fact that so many young women, A, have continued to work, and B, they have continued to make certain resources available. They have curated shows, online shows. They have managed to persuade certain galleries to host those shows, even while all the work is going online. They have been writing about the arts. There have been so many panels, discussions online, talking about work, talking about the struggle, talking about the enormous pressures on women during the pandemic in Pakistan, elsewhere, the violence against women that has increased, and making that somehow the subject of what they're talking about. Yeah. So I think women have done, you know, more than they were able to, considering all the problems. And one is proud today, women are marching. They're marching all over Pakistan, and they're marching in places where they would not have been allowed to enter public spaces. And I fear that there's going to be resistance, because, you know, that's what women, but I also understand that the theme this year is women's health. That's the theme of all marches, because we know that that has been one of the major problems during the pandemic, is the woman's health, both mental and otherwise, and the fact that the state does not provide resources. So I'm very glad that the marches this year have this very strong theme. And as we are speaking, because we're talking at a particular time, where I know that women are getting ready. They're taking out their banners and they're taking to the streets. And there will be resistance. We know that too, but it's not the first time. And it's not the last time. You said we are still at the beginning of a very, very long journey. We have to fight for our sisters. We have to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves.
So I think that's a wonderful account of the fact that we know that women are able to determine for themselves that they will be in public space. And we also know that artists in particular, whose vocation is to tell a story of themselves and society, are still finding ways and means of doing that. But you talked about the impact of health, women's health. And I want to talk to both Kulsoom and Stevie about that. Kulsoom, I'm going to come to you first. Kulsoom Gayas, you're an associate professor and chair of the Department of Biological and Biomedical Sciences at the Aga Khan University in Karachi. And you have a very long history of medical research. And I was noticing that particularly your research is into leukemia and cancer, different kinds of cancers. So watching the whole health service sort of pivot or go on hold or whatever, however you would describe it, in order to deal with this pandemic, might have been painful in terms of the progress that you've been trying to make. It's necessary, but painful. But you've been watching the front line, and certainly in many of the places around the world that I've been talking to, it's women on the front line mainly. It's women doing underpaid, undervalued roles, and yet they're day and night putting their lives literally in danger. And basically not expecting anything in return, because that's what society has just made as an expectation of them. What's your current sense of the health of the nation in Pakistan with regard to its own health workers?
Jude, thank you so much for inviting me and for asking such an insightful question. You're absolutely right. Women and traditionally within the health sciences, this has been one of the accepted professions in a country like Pakistan for women to be doctors, or Aga Khan University particularly really was a standard bearer for promoting nursing as a really honorable profession amongst women. It's been, as you've said, the world over, the women have been on the front lines. If you take the example of Pakistan, it's within the healthcare sector. It's not just the physicians and the nurses, it's the nursing aides, it's women making decisions as far as hospital management and healthcare is concerned. And particularly within the diagnostic spectrum as well. So there are many examples of women scientists being on the forefront within Pakistan and beyond in putting forth some of the initial tests that were responsible for testing COVID variants, for women leading the clinical trials, again, not just in Pakistan, but certainly beyond. And finally, women scientists being responsible for the COVID vaccine, from which many of us are benefiting. It's been hugely frustrating, I'm sure, for many people, and this is men and women included in the sciences, to have a lot of our work come to because we did not have access to if you talk about my cancer research in particular, we didn't have access to materials and consumables. We had to protect our staff. And there were many considerations that slowed down the pace of what was our regular work. It hasn't gone unnoticed. In fact, it's been channeled towards resources that have benefited the fight against COVID within the country. It has meant, though, that it's taken a toll on all of us because we have been working really unprecedented hours, and this goes for all the women and the men in the healthcare sector across the world, because it's about taking care of our professional responsibilities, but that translates into certain dangers that we all felt we were taking home when we went back to our loved ones and families. And so protecting them, especially when in the initial months when it was very, very unknown, protecting our children. I went a couple months without even seeing my parents and my grandmother in person because we just weren't sure how much risk we were exposing them too. But as a community, I really have to hail in Pakistan the healthcare community that whether it's been celebrated or not, they have really come forward in response to the pandemic, as we've seen the world over.
Mm-hmm. Let me talk, Stevie, to you, because you are both the chair of the British Council worldwide from August 2019, but you're also chair of Mind, which is a mental health charity. And it's been a big part of your life to always think about not just the sort of the physical aspects of somebody's health, but the mental health issues in all kinds of ways. Now, the mental health has become something which we are more familiar with now, more able to talk about. There's less shame attached to it, all of which is really, really good. But I would think this pandemic has exacerbated many conditions, but also revealed conditions, revealed underlying anxieties, and just brought on, sheer terror at the idea of poverty, at the idea of illness, surrounded by real morbidity, etc. How running a huge institution like the British Council, with staff right across the world, all experiencing different things in different ways, how do you attend to something like mental health, not in a bureaucratic way, but in a humane and personal way? What's the methods you use?
Thanks, Jude. And I think that humane and personal are both words that come to mind in how we're approaching the challenge, because there is absolutely no doubt that the global physical health challenge is being met with a global mental health challenge that will turn into a mental health crisis, particularly for those people who were already dealing with some fragile mental health prior. It's all been exaggerated. And trying to keep 15,000 colleagues safe around the world within the confines and the structure of the British Council, you will not be surprised to know that mental health is high on what we're trying to do in terms of keeping colleagues safe beyond the COVID secure changes that we're making. So, we it's no surprise we do mental health awareness courses, and they're online for all staff. We have a big part to play in Time to Talk Day and Time to Change, and probably the most important thing that we do, because when you've got that many people in that many places around the world, you are dependent on line managers. And the most important thing we do, I think, is encourage our leaders at all levels to look after themselves first, which can feel counterintuitive. But it's a bit like you were talking about unmasking earlier. It's a bit like when you're on an aeroplane, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help anybody else. So I think it's really, really important that we're encouraging line managers to look after themselves, to help build their own resilience before, alongside them helping other people. And part of that is trying to encourage a culture of openness and support, because, you will have heard me say this 1,000 times, the culture of an organization is what drives it, much more than the strategy that you're going through. I think also to repeat what colleagues have already said, the crisis has most affected those who are already fragile, particularly women, because it's women who are coping at the forefront, not just of dealing with the crisis, the health crisis in hospitals and at the coalface, but in the home. They're the ones coping with the extra bereavement. They're the ones coping with the extra caring responsibilities, with the extra stress. And I think that, supporting what Salima just said, they're the ones locked up in home in an abusive relationship when they're not allowed out. So So yes, we are all in this together, but we are certainly not all in this together equally. And I think that our role as leaders is to make sure that we are being kind to each other and to our colleagues. We're challenging for change, to come back to the theme of the day, and we are making sure that our colleagues stay well, or if they are unwell, that they get well, or if they tip over into a more severe and enduring problem, that we help them to learn to live well with that diagnosis. There's a lot that we can do, but being kind to each other is a good starting point.
I think this has tested the imagination and the empathetic imagination of many, many leaders, who themselves, our own upbringings maybe teach us to kind of stay buttoned up about emotions. How do we then provide the right way of talking to staff who need to explore their feelings? It's a very complex landscape. And when we talk about we'll build back better, right very early on, there were some phrases that came out of it. We'll build back better, we're all in this together. I remember Rebecca Solzhenitsyn saying, well, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all sailing on the same boat. Some are in huge liners and some are in inflatable dinghies that are just about to collapse. And I think that it's a while until we'll see the debris on the shore, the economic debris, the emotional debris. And during that time, of course, there's been a huge debate about power, not just the Black Lives Matter conversation, which is absolutely central as well in terms of mental health for many, but also the whole idea, as you say, about violence in society against women, about underpaid and undervalued people. The reset will be very, very demanding ethically, I think. Susie Saluja, can I come to you? Obviously, you are somebody who's been working for 30 years in the whole territory of technology, how business has used and forged its relationship with technology to make a faster global economy, a faster world of communication, etc. And you've always been very committed to the idea of education, good education around technology. We have a reason to celebrate where we are at the moment in terms of digital advancement, because it's allowed forums like this to exist, where thousands of people who wouldn't be able to be there in the flesh are actually joining online, and that's magnificent. But there is a but, isn't there? Which is that it's exposed the digital divide in a huge way. I mean, in the UK, the digital divide means that kids who only might have one device in the house, if that, are all trying to do their homework on that one device, which is probably their mum's phone. And then there are other people who, aren't allowed to even have a phone if they're in a difficult relationship, etc. And there's huge problems now about assuming that society has just jumped into this digital space, whilst realizing many people aren't there, can't be there, and won't be there unless we take a very systematic approach to closing this digital divide. What's your sense of how concerned people are about it, and what remedies you think are being urged forward through governments and businesses?
Thanks, Jude. Great question. Before I answer that, just a couple of quick points, if I may. Firstly, thank you for having me on the panel as the only man on the panel today. It's a great honour and privilege on this day. And secondly, I was very moved by some of the comments earlier, particularly those from Salima. And as the son of two parents who both separately experienced great hardship in the partition of 47, that's something which certainly runs through my own family background, and something which I could relate to, particularly the analogy of raising the white flag. So very moved by those. On your question specifically around digital, you're absolutely right. The pandemic has accelerated many of the trends, but also exposed many of the fault lines, and you've outlined some of the key fault lines. I think in some ways we have to look at this as a paradox. We have to remain excited about the opportunities that arise, but also recognize some of the issues and frustrations and deal with those. I think particularly in the area of learning and education that you talked about, we have seen that move quite quickly, and we have seen, as you say, a lot of emphasis on some of the infrastructure components. And in some ways, that's a bigger challenge in some parts of the world than other parts of the world. In other ways, it's also an opportunity. And I think in the short term, there's no doubt that infrastructure is one of the key enablers that will help avoid digital divides, and continuing to focus on that, including broadband, including connectivity, I think is something that everybody will need to worry about. Where we've seen that work well and where we've seen countries leapfrog technologies, that's been hugely successful. And you only have to look at some of the electronic payments in East Africa to see that where countries have decided to move to rapid mobile deployment, that actually that can be hugely beneficial in accelerating the take-up and reducing the divide. I think there are probably three things I would pull out. The first is to continue to focus on the enablers and the infrastructure. And I think there's some very positive signs in all parts of the world, but much more needs to be done. Secondly, we often underestimate the human capital and the human implications of moving to the digital world. It's not only the idea of digital fatigue, which many people have. It's not only the shift in that comes from looking at a screen, but also some of the domestic implications that follow from that, but also some of the digital savviness that's required to be able to move to that. And I think all of these take time. I think we should just recognize those explicitly and deal with those explicitly. And thirdly, I think we shouldn't be afraid to be able to say that we want to start small, get the basics right, both in infrastructure and human terms, and then focus on scaling fast. I think scaling fast can only really happen when you've got some of the infrastructure and human aspects right. And that does take time, particularly in different parts of the world. So those would be some of the things I would just highlight on that point, Jude.
Mm-hmm. And incidentally, please don't apologize for being here as a man. I want to stress all the time that I don't believe that we can have global equity unless we're all involved. We all have to care. We all have to be part of it. I know that you're a feminist and you're there to make the world better for all of us. So, you know, it's a really key thing. I think that we don't bring men on board in order to just sort of prop up our arguments. We bring men on board because if they're like you, it matters to your life and your ethical position. So, you know, I just want to say that we have to keep involving all of us together. So thanks for everything that you do, Sushil, as well on the British Council. I'm going to come to Natasha Ansari now. Hi, Natasha. Because listening to what Sushil's saying about, you know, in a way, make sure that you're bedding in at the right level changes so that when they scale, they don't distort. You know, I'm thinking particularly about we have huge problems with AI because we've scaled it really quickly, but we didn't understand that the female voice within AI was absent by and large because the design was done by men and not taking into account women. You have done so much in the area of looking at urban design, looking at sort of research generally on the way society operates. And you've taken those thoughts and turned it into support for activism. You know, co-founded the Girls at Dabab's feminist initiative, looking at how you can have more conversations about the right for women in public spaces. This moment of the pandemic, do you think this is galvanizing women's activism and girls' activism? And do you think that business and government are now recognizing the need to give women and girls the tools for that activism to permeate into long-standing and effective change?
At this moment in the pandemic, I definitely think, I mean, because how confined we have been indoors, I feel like I've been seeing more women right outside my street walking and, claiming public space within their own neighborhoods. And that's not even, consciously done. So I do feel like, this is like kind of forcing people to like navigate relationships and their positionality maybe as women and gender norms at home. In terms of, could you repeat your question about business and, yeah.
Do you think that governments and businesses are recognizing the impact that the pandemic's having negatively on girls and women, and that they're going to use their forces to try to make change? You know, do you think they want to support more activism as a result?
I'm not sure about business and government doing that directly, but I do see like movements like the Aurat March certainly highlighting those issues and, you know, talking about maybe increased domestic violence at home as a result of the pandemic and issues like that. And so the awareness is being generated from the feminist circles for sure. I think the uptake we are still yet to see.
And there's a lot of conversations about girls' mental health in particular around the world. And I'm wondering whether you think that, I've often felt that well, girls were the last in line to get support, to get attention, to get visibility. Is that still the case in the pandemic?
Absolutely, I think. I mean, personally at home, I've seen how much intensive care labor has been involved. We have a disability at home. My brother was disabled. So just how much that, how the pandemic kind of exacerbated responsibilities around that, and how much of that was invisible and how much of that was unpaid labor. You know, like I couldn't even imagine the amount of things that went into his care to be considered unpaid labor, and that kind of falling mostly on women's shoulders is kind of, it's unfathomable to me that this is not recognized.
It's been true in the UK that there is a huge disparity in terms of housework done by girls as opposed to boys.
Yeah.
So over and over again, the statistics are saying women are having an undue and detrimental experience, you know, massively during COVID in all kinds of ways, having to give up their jobs first, having to furlough first, etc. And the mental strain of homeschooling as well as, you know, caring generally. So I'm just going to come to my final question before I talk to the curators. Rachel, to you, you're the Deputy Chair of the British Council, but you have a lifelong experience in looking at business and government and the economies of trying to balance financial sort of security with societies being progressive. And at the moment, when you look across the world, do you think that we are looking at governments rethinking their attitude to women and women's needs? We've had so much conversation about, as I say, build back better. We've had plenty of evidence that COVID, like many crises, has a huge and detrimental impact on women. But I personally am not hearing the narrative from governments that go, okay, we're going to start with women. We're going to start with women and girls. We'll get that right, and then everybody else will benefit. What's your sense of that dialogue at top government level at the moment?
Well, I think governments are hugely challenged by what has been a massive natural disaster, which the like of which no one's really had to tackle in this generation or the previous one. So they're completely focused on getting through the pandemic, tackling the public health crisis, and just, if they're supporting people who've been most hit by through crude income transfers, furlough schemes, huge spending of money just to get through to the other side. So do I think that much really serious thought has gone into, thinking about what the better life at the other side will look like? From where I sit in the UK, I think the honest answer is no. There's a lot of talk about building back better, but it's mostly people digging out things that they wanted to do anyhow and dusting off the old agendas. And I do think, though, that I don't feel completely pessimistic about it. I think what this crisis has done is thrown a very harsh light on existing inequities in our society, gender, racial, and all the rest of it. And you can see through the Black Lives Matter, which I think you actually can't completely separate from the pandemic. I think that it was, the emotion behind it was partly fueled by the sense of crisis. I think that has produced a much sharper focus on very long-standing racial injustice in business, as well as and governments respond to what their populations think. So, I mean, I do hope that one of the things that this crisis may have done is fueled a political mood which may influence governments the other side of the crisis. Because I think the other thing that has become very clear is how dependent society is on underpaid people who work in the front line. You know, not just the nurses and the healthcare workers and the carers who are looking after people, but, you know, the delivery guys. And I think that sense that society is being supported by very underpaid key workers is part of hopefully helping to build a slightly different political mood, which might fuel change in the future, not for now. Now, do girls focus on all this? No, to a disappointing extent they don't. But I think to the extent that the reason why this crisis, like so many others, has hit women worst is because they're the most vulnerable. They don't have economic power. They don't have, in many cases, political power. And I think that you know, the focus has got to be on giving women the power to be listened to.
Yeah.
And the thing that I worry about most, which we haven't talked about, so I did want to just put it on the table, is the impact of this crisis on young people and their interrupted education. And you know, the people, the most privileged young people probably haven't been that much disadvantaged by interrupted schooling, but you can be absolutely certain that the least privileged and those who aren't in full-time education at all, and there are too many of those in Pakistan, those are the ones that have really suffered. And I think a really pressure on governments for a really focused catch-up program for young people is something that would benefit women, but I think is necessary really in terms of intergenerational equity as well. Because I'm painfully aware that, you know, my grandchildren's generation are paying the price for safeguarding my life. You know, a lot of this is the intergenerational unfairness of all this is terrible, really. And I think the one thing that governments should be focusing on is making it up to young people, people whose education's been interrupted, particularly the ones that, you know, for whom education is the most important. Because, you know, if you were to say, well, what has been the real engine of progress for women over the last century? It's been education. Girls' education is just so hugely important. And I think the idea that it might have suffered as a result of this pandemic is the thing that kind of grieves me most, and the thing that I think there should be the most pressure on governments to focus on the other side if we ever get to it, to this pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's why the conversation that Salima at one end of the generations has referred to, and Natasha at the other end, of, you know, the need to change the cultural attitude within countries, so that ordinary girls and women feel they have rights intrinsically and they're expecting those rights and they can articulate those rights. That is what changes governments. You know, things don't change top down, they change bottom up. And that's why we just need to keep on giving those tools of confidence and rights to everyone. Amne and Kanwal, there you are, sort of, you know, you're listening in on all of this and looking at the program, which has covered everything from martial arts to Malala. This has been a festival, again, like all the WOW festivals, that says whoever you are and however small you think you are, your story does matter. It's the collective stories that can change the world. What for you has given you a sense of optimism, stamina to carry on making change? Amna, can I start with you? What would you say that the highlights of the festival have been? I mean, you've been in social development for years as an entrepreneur, as interested in community development in every way. What's been a sense that this festival has brought online, which it perhaps couldn't do in the flesh?
Thank you, Jude. I'm really excited to be here and to be talking about all the work that we've done this year. It's been challenging, I think, I mean, in terms of the digital aspect of it. I think we've referenced the fact that in some ways it allowed us to include people, to have this panel, for example. I think it's an excellent example of what we would not have been able to do at the festival, take traditional physical form. But in terms of, what we lost, obviously, is I do worry a little bit about the inclusion. I mean, there's a lot of people who couldn't come online, who couldn't join us. I know we did try, and I think Kawal will speak to that a little bit about how we tried to do a little bit in regional languages. The festival was PSL interpreted. It is captioned in Urdu for conversations that did take place in English. But that is only for those people who are actually able to log in and access it. But in terms of why I do this work, I think that was the first thing you asked. And I mean, part of it is, I think it's a continuum across a lot of the work that I do in the gender space, but it's a sense of community. I think what WOW has been able to give me, and it delivers year on year. This year, I was looking at earlier last night, we were all looking at the list of women that we worked with this year in some which way and form. I mean, just on our list of delegates, it's over 125 incredible women. And I think it's that community, it's the energy that you get, it's the inspiration that you get. I feel so incredibly privileged because quite often I leave this forum with new friends, with so many new ideas, with so much more stamina, as you said, and so much more energy to keep doing what it is we do, which can sometimes seem quite thankless and not rewarding unless you're in that community space where you realize how much that you're not alone.
Yeah, well, I'm going to end with you, Kanwal, even though, this is the last word, I want you to have it, but partly because the curators said to me at the beginning, well, leave us till last because we're just the people who are doing the work. And I said, that's so typical of women to say, well, I'll do all the work, but you don't need to really make much of it. We don't want to make a lot of it. We want to make a lot of the curating of this fantastic festival and all the thinking that you've done to make it truly intersectional, to make it vibrant, to make it accessible. What is your takeaway, Kanwal, on this digital festival? And hopefully we'll be live again next year.
Thank you. So as much as I hope that we are able to do this festival live face-to-face next year, but I still would like to, have some components taking place digitally, because, what digital allows you is this international, this intersectional, this interracial, this, this amazing access to not just people, but just to, let's say, to all those, it helps you almost, let's say, cut across all geographical boundaries and, talking to people that you may otherwise would not be able to talk to. This particular rendition, again, we were particularly aware of, designing a set of programs which would allow us to not just bring to the table the issues that are politically, socially relevant, but we also wanted to celebrate womanhood and bring about some programs that, just celebrate what women have achieved so far and not leave out, the achievements and the contributions that have been made by not just women, but by people who have not been in the main room so far. Again, people with technology have been making, let's say, during this last year, what we witnessed have been making decisions for people who don't have technology. And this is what was our main concern around designing the programs this year, that we do not leave them behind. Since digital cuts across boundaries and timelines, so we should be having, let's say, programs that are multilingual, like Amne's just told you. All the programs have been PSL interpreted, and then there are subtitles added to it also for the programs that are that are English in language. So this whole ride of coming up with this festival has been quite surreal. It was almost like riding on a local Pakistani bus where you didn't know the route, and it had all those bumps and all those barriers, and you were bumping into so many weirdly interesting but important conversations and people. It had its own perks, it had its own problems, and and the ride is still going on.
Mm-hmm. When you started this festival, Amne and Kanwal, did you have you become more of an activist? I suppose that's my question, really. Has it changed your sense of the systemic nature of injustice and therefore the need to give different tools to people to understand their lives, our lives?
I think I can address that for both of us to say we do this because we think it's necessary. But what it does bring is a deeper understanding of the space we're trying to navigate. And Kawal, would you agree?
Definitely. Again, as a storyteller, I get this is exactly what we do with this festival and with the other kind of stories that we tell.
Yeah. So it's a vehicle for your activism, but it also makes the range of things that you get to understand, even more critical. I did a session in the UK yesterday on grandmothers, because grandmothers is a sort of phrase that we use all over the world that sort of suggests something, homely, comfortable, always available, totally missing the fact that grandmothers are still women with lives to go, with ambitions still to go. Often they themselves are dealing with, poor health. They're dealing with poor economics. They're often still in violent relationships. There's all sorts of things that grandmothers, if you like, are experiencing. They're often given much too much care work, having already come through the caring of their children. And yet society's sort of imagery around grandmothers is so benign and unthoughtless, I think. So I'm always finding with the WOW festivals that we're exploring things which you might not think about if you're not a grandmother, but you suddenly, it opens up your eyes in a really extraordinary and wonderful way. And I was thinking, going back to personal reflections on this time, because at the very beginning of this discussion, Salima said, this has been a period of reflection. And I mean, just on a personal level, Natasha, what reflection have you had during the pandemic of a personal nature? I don't mean you have to completely reveal all your thinking, but what's it made you consider during this time of lockdown?
So I've been thinking about the lockdown a lot in terms of disability and women's labor. I feel like, given what the amount of labor I've seen my mother put in around my siblings' care, I feel like the world almost kind of caught up to her, because it impeded her mobility so much that I feel like I was able to also understand what she was going through as a result of the pandemic and understand her positionality in terms of caregiving and all of that. So I feel like it has opened my eyes in some ways to women's labor and how it can be so easily, her mobility can so easily be impeded with something as common as disability in the family, and especially if you're a single parent.
I think that thing of living close up to things that you hadn't perhaps observed so much before.
Yeah,
Sheil, what about you? You've got to go shortly, I know, but has anything happened to your thinking or your feelings during this pandemic that's taken you by surprise?
I think what's really come home to me is the vulnerability of the human race, actually. And I think it's been clear that as the pandemic struck, that there's some things that we just can't control. The second thing that follows is just to the point that Rachel made earlier, the distribution of load has been unequal, and you see that across households, and you see that generally with women taking the strain at home more than men in a number of situations. And I think that those are two reflections that are very high up in my mind.
Stevie, you also have got to go to another relentless day of Zooming, I'm sure. But what about you personally, as somebody who's always out, always networking, always loves connecting with people and always giving hugs? I know that's what you do. So what's the impact? What have you had to think about yourself personally during this time?
Thank you, Jude. Listen, it's been a torrid year for everybody, and we have coped with loss directly and indirectly, of people and freedoms and liberations. But to be optimistic and upbeat for a second, I think that our physical world shrinking during lockdown has given time for and space for reflection to those of us who have been able to feel safe. And I really, really hope that some of that reflection and some of that learning maintains into, quote, the real world when some of our liberations are restored. I think that learning to be kind to ourselves and each other, I really, really hope maintains, because like Sushil, I think what we've done is shine a spotlight on inequity and inequality in a way that we have been forced to confront when we might have been avoiding. So I hope that some of the time we've had for reflection, and frankly, for many of us here today to count our blessings, that we count those blessings and use some of what we've learned to allow others to raise the bar.
Kulsoom, you talked movingly about like not really being able to see your loved ones for a while, and also the huge anxiety of families thinking that their own loved ones might be putting themselves in danger, which I imagine your own family thought. Has it changed you, this pandemic, in terms of your priorities or your sense of identity?
Certainly. And I think I want to pick up where Stevie left off. I think it's made me recognize on a personal level the huge position of privilege that I personally come from. So I was able to continue to work. I had lots of support at home. But in highlighting my own privilege, it revealed the lack thereof for so many others who did not have the same kind of support. It just shone a light on a situation that perhaps otherwise would have been peripheral to my understanding. But appreciating what I had really put into the spotlight what others, particularly women, did not have. In the support at home, in a spouse who would pick up the slack with the kids' education, so many things that I think that came from my own personal position of privilege. I also saw some glimmers of hope. As Natasha was pointing out, I saw women reclaiming the neighborhood, children playing on the streets that used to happen 30 years ago when I might have also played on the streets. And we saw a rise within our neighborhood of a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and also a sense of entrepreneurship, largely driven by women who now at home, perhaps out of need, but also out of demand, providing goods and services out of their homes that I would love to see continue and flourish going forward. But there is something, coming back to your point about loss, that I think, and this has been talked about with the impact on mental health, that I don't think we've quite addressed yet. And as a nation, particularly, we have a particular way that we grieve and mourn. When somebody passes away, it doesn't even have to be someone who's very close to you. It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend's parent. We go, we visit the house, we are involved in rituals that really bring about closure for the family as well as the community. And I think that's going to have a ripple down effect that we haven't been able to have that closure. We've forgotten the people that we've lost in many ways. And when things do revert to some sort of a normal and you go out and you don't see the people that you expect to see, you realize you've lost them forever and you never had the time to actually come to some sort of closure for that. So it's been, it's been a full spectrum of personal optimism and appreciation of everything that I have, but also the counterbalance of that is just appreciating what others do not.
There's a lot of you talking about just the realization of inequity, the depths of inequity, the depths of privilege. Then the contrast to that, and how what you just talked about as well about like how we're going to actually grieve. Rachel, your final comments. I mean, you've expressed your anxiety about kind of like younger people having to sort of sacrifice dreams in order that the older generation are protected. Although I don't know many young people who don't want to protect the older generation, because the older generation mean a lot to them. But what's been your takeaway from this so far?
So at a personal level, it's been fine for me. I've quite enjoyed not dashing around so much. I'm, in a very privileged position. I always thought I'd do well under house arrest or in prison, and so it turns out I don't go around hugging people in normal circumstances, and that's a bit of a plus. So I've done a lot of reading, and it's been fine at a personal level. The thing I've really cared about is I haven't seen my grandchildren for a very long time because they're not within walking distance of me. Three of them are in Japan, and I don't know when I'll see them next. Their education has been interrupted in ways I can't really assess. One of them has basically taken a year out of college. The other two are sort of, sometimes it's been Zoom, sometimes it's been the odd day at school. Another one has had, months out of school and then a few days in and so on. I see young people hanging out in the local parks. Actually, it's, as someone said a few minutes ago, they look as if they're having fun. They're all sitting in big circles drinking beer, and it's sort of back to the 1950s, and they don't have to hang out in malls, and they're kind of rediscovering some of the sort of simpler pleasures of life. But, there's a huge amount of uncertainty about what the future holds for these kids. And that really does worry me. And I don't know at the personal level when I'm talking to my grandchildren, or at the theoretical level when I think about, what does the future hold sort of more sort of in a more macro sense. I really don't know where this is all leading. And given the experience they've been through, that's the thing that really, really bugs me, actually. How do you enable kids to live through this and the uncertainty and the very changed world that they may be moving into? That's my main worry, I have to say. I spent a lot of time contemplating.
I totally identify with the pain of not being able to see children, grandchildren, and worrying about their future. Salima, you started the conversation, and we're going to end the conversation with you with that extraordinary image of you as a 4-year-old on a donkey waving a white flag. And in a way, you said, I've been doing that ever since. I've been walking towards the future, speaking of peace. You've lived through extraordinary trauma and chaos. What's your feeling about how we best need to proceed for purposes of healing, for the purposes of change? What's your hope for us as we tackle the result of all of this?
Well, one's hope is that humankind has the ability to learn from this time of great suffering. And one has seen immense suffering, especially in the region where we live, where it has been to do with food, the lack of it, the inability to provide for families, very often falling in the woman's lap, the large number of domestic labor, which were women, the migrant laborers, their suffering, and so on and so forth. How much of this is going to permeate the minds of people at large is the major question. The word closure was mentioned, and I believe that yes, we will have to have closure. It'll have to be universal closure. What its terms will be, how it is actually going to be articulated is the challenge. And because today we are celebrating women, I feel very strongly that it might be women and women only who carry the message of peace and some hope for the generations beyond our time. I think we need women.
Okay, that's a very fantastically fitting point to end. We need women. We need women who feel confident of their place in the world, that have the language, that have the sense of potential, And we need them to model that change for their children too. And so I hope that we all feel that WOW is a contribution into this world stage of change making. It's been a great privilege to host this panel. Thank you so much. And it's been brilliant to see the whole WOW Festival as it's unfolded in Pakistan. Here's to having it again next year live, but let's not underestimate how grateful we are to technology for being able to connect us like this. Lots of love, everybody. I think that's the bottom line, isn't it? We need to find as much love as possible and work out how to turn that into policy. So happy International
This is Sandy and this is Lena, and we are Eternal Tal. Eternal Tal established in 1999, and since then we've been performing non-stop. World's first female door players that have performed non-stop promoting Indian music to a wider audience. What makes us special? We're all girls. We only don't just drum, we DJ, we dance, we sing, and we promote everything to do with female entertainment in the industry. What makes us extraordinary? We perform to a diverse audience and to people who've never seen the Indian drum being played, especially when it's girls. And we are Eternal Tal.
Not only is the Dole a male-dominated industry and very different for females to be in that kind of area and doing the Dole and performing, but it's also an amazing kind of instrument for us to express how we feel and to express how women can empower. And the feedback we get from every performance is amazing. And not only do we get attention for our amazing colours and extravagant colours on our uniform, but we also get recognised for our charisma, for our talent, for our presence, for everything. And because of that, we've got some very high-end gigs. We've been to Bollywood film sets, and we've also done BBC and charity events. And honestly, we love it.
And not only do we perform as Dole drummers, but we also teach how to play the drum in the UK and abroad on all virtual educational platforms. So if you want to know more about Eternal Tal, follow us on all social media platforms at Eternal Tal.
हम तेरे बिन अब रह नहीं
नहीं सकते, तेरे बिना क्या वजूद मेरा। हम तेरे बिन अब रह नहीं सकते, तेरे बिना क्या वजूद मेरा। तुझसे जुदा अगर हो जाएंगे तो खुद से ही हो जाएंगे जुदा, क्योंकि तुम ही हो, अब तुम ही हो जिंदगी, अब तुम ही हो। चैन भी मेरा दर्द भी मेरी आशिकी, अब तुम ही हो।
मेरा झुमका उठा के लाया यार वे, जो गिरा था बरेली के बाजार में। मैं तो ठुमका लगा के शर्मा गई, बोली घूम कर बता दे के मैं आ गई। मुझको लौटा के नाच ले, आजा नाच ले मेरी यार, तू नच ले छनक छनक छनका। नच ले मेरे यार, तू नच ले अब तो लौटा है बाजार। सबको बुला के नच ले, आजा नच ले मेरे यार, तू नच ले छनक छनक छनका। नच ले मेरे यार, तू नच ले अब तो लौटा है बाजार। धिंकड़ाक आजा उड़ के सराट, पैरों से बेड़ी जरा खोल, नगाड़ संग ढोल बाजे धाय धाय धम धम धाय। नगाड़ संग ढोल बाजे धाय 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 धम धाय। धिंकड़ाक आजा उड़ के सराट, पैरों से बेड़ी जरा खोल, नगाड़ संग ढोल बाजे धाय धाय धम धम धाय। नगाड़ संग ढोल बाजे धाय 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 धम धाय।
Welcome to
Radical Comedy Karachi.
I am Natalie Diddams and I am a Manchester-based academic researcher and theatre director.
I am Saida Natalia Gul. I am a stand-up comedian and I have an event company by the name of Jungle, which builds on reviving art and entertainment culture in Pakistan.
And we've been working together over the past 4 weeks on a brilliant project in Karachi that has been getting women to perform stand-up comedy for the first time. Now, this is based on a project that I've run in Bradford in the United Kingdom for the past 5 years. And that project invites women to experiment with humour in like a safe and supportive workshop environment. The methodology that I've developed over that time, which I wrote a PhD thesis on, basically gives women the space to grow and develop in their own way. So it trusts that women are funny, which is something that in the UK and I think also in Pakistan I'm learning, women often think that they're not. So it trusts that women are funny, and it helps them to collaboratively explore their sense of humour and write stand-up material from that kind of place of support and solidarity.
Yes, thank you so much, Natalie. I think we can thank technology as well, that nowadays we can be global, and we've been able to reach you to give us this information and the skill that was really needed in Pakistan. We don't have enough female comics in Pakistan. And when I was doing my comedy open mic every week, I would have a lineup of men and only 2 female comics. But thanks to you, now we're going to get done with having like 14 female comics. I think that's a huge number, and all of them are brilliant. With your training and with everything that we've learned from you, I think they've all have developed a skill that they're ready to take stage.
Absolutely. And I think what's also really exciting for me is creating new female stand-ups, but also empowering women to take up more space in their everyday lives. So I know from my own experience of doing stand-up that actually getting up on that stage and performing to an audience and getting them to laugh has really had an impact on how I behave in other scenarios. I feel much more confident now making jokes in my everyday life, and also kind of other kinds of behaviours, like being a bit more assertive sometimes, I think. So comedy can help with a whole variety of aspects of your life, and I think we're kind of spreading that sort of sense of empowerment to these women as well, aren't we?
We are.
Should we show some clips?
Yes, definitely. I think there are too many bugs around me, really bothering me, and I think we should now. It's making the atmosphere really funny, but let's just play some clips now.
Let's play some clips. Okay, so what you're going to see is work in progress stand-up comedy from some of our participants. All of it was recorded in a workshop that happened online, and it's absolutely by no means polished. It's all women performing for the first time, brand new material that they've literally only just written. And in the workshop, we would also be giving each other feedback and playing games and taking part in exercises. So we're kind of inviting you into our workshop space here. And we hope that you enjoy it.
Hi, everyone. Well, I think I deserve a round of applause for keeping my 2 children alive. I've kept one alive for 6 years. The other one for 9 years. And if you're not a parent, you probably don't know this, but children for the first 3 years of their lives are suicidal motherfuckers. Like, do you know how easy it is for a child to die on your watch? All you have to do is this. And when you look back, they will either be committing suicide or they would have already committed suicide. It doesn't matter what you give them a spoon and try looking away. Spoon. Airport security will even let that thing through. But children, you give them a spoon, and they'll either have, when you look back, they'll either have stuck it into the socket, or they would have shoved it up an orifice and will need medical assistance to get it out. When did we decide to change the rules? Why did we stop accepting these rules that all children universally accept? Like, one of the things one of my kids did during when they were having a fight for the softest pillow, the fight they have every night, and my 6-year-old picked up the pillow and just did this. And he said, he looked into my older son's eyes and said, if you've licked it, you've nicked it. Licked it, you've nicked it. Can you imagine going to a grocery store and just going around like, got the milk, bread, and then 1 egg? 2 eggs. Are you sure?
Hi, everyone. Like most families, we also think we're unique, but we really are unique. My family thrives on misery, and the main goal is for each member to prove that they're more miserable and more unwell than the other. True. It's a very, very competitive game. I'll start with Michael. She's 86 years old and has led a full, wealthy, healthy life. She has seen her children marry, her grandchildren marry. She's seen her great-grandchildren. And the way she's going, I think she will see at least one great-grandchild marry too. But the thing is, she is convinced. She's been terminally ill for the last 30 years. And yet, she's there. So she thinks she's there. But then there is my mother, who uses illness as an attention-seeking tactic. Till date, she has had 2 heart attacks, kind of cancer, and numerous typhoids and choleras. But the thing is, it's all in her mind. The saddest thing, the saddest day actually in my mother's life was when her sister was diagnosed with cancer last year. She was very sad because, you know, the sisters are close. But, you know, then she said, she beat me to it.
So I'm at a point in my life where I can't complain, but I love to. My philosophy is, why work hard when you can work smart? I'm like the Garfield of people, except for the part where there is a man taking care of me. Lekin uspe bhi kaam ho raha hai. I'm working on it. I have started replying to everyone who slips into my DMs. I'm just trying to catch one so I can lick it and nick it. And you know what, like, the pandemic has been so good to me and it makes me feel so guilty. Especially since people are going through a lot of shit while all I'm going through is I do laundry on company time. I mean, like, Bushra's like lost her job and I'm like, oh, Bushra, let me take you out to lunch. You know, we'll figure this out. And she's like, but don't you have work? And I'm like, yes, yes, I do. Abusive relationships, a solution on that. It's tricky, right? Because there's always going to be some asshole who's going to say, but if you were in such a miserable relationship, why didn't you leave him? That's like, you don't say that, like, right, girls? Like, that's the shittiest thing to say to anyone. You know what you should say? You should say, if you were in such a miserable relationship, why didn't you tell everyone that he said talaq 3 times? I mean, everyone's gonna swoop in. Your dad, your puppo, mohalle wali auntie, they're not gonna let you be in the same 3-mile radius of each other. Like, nikah nama bhi damn. Your dad's gonna be like, usne talaq de diya tumhe 3 martaba, us ghar se niklo tum. You don't even have to prove you were in an abusive relationship, you know? It's cheaper than a restraining order.
Okay, so whenever I'm about to start something, there's another show going inside my head where a part of my brain is like, am I overthinking this? And the other part is, that's the only way I know how to think. So deal with it. Baap ko mat sikha. Okay, so I want to talk about how utterly confused Desi people can be, how they lack basic self-awareness, and majorly my family members, and how tough it is to deal with them. I mean, the other day, my khala was talking to my mother. She was saying that Said, who's her husband, she's like, Said, meri bilkul baat nahi sunte, sirf apni ammi ki baat sunte hain. And some seconds later, she was like, Nabil ko hamari baat sunni chahiye. Iski beewi to abhi aayi hai. Beewi ki baat sunta hai. And I'm like, okay. And my family members' favorite thing to do is bitch about my cousin who works in the movies. It's like they all gather up and they talk shit about her. And majorly my khala, she's like, kitni besharam hai. Drama se filmon mein chale gayi. And some seconds later, she calls her 8-year-old daughter and she's like, बेटा सबको डांस करके दिखाओ ना जो तुमने सीखा है कल और जो तुमने परफॉर्म किया था क्लास में वो परफॉर्मेंस तो करके दिखाओ. अच्छा परफॉर्म करती है ना, ये मैं क्या बताऊं, बहुत अच्छा डांस करती है. And I'm like, okay.
एक तो भाई जब आप जॉइंट पीते हैं ना तो आपको ऐसा लगता है कि आप जमीन पर हैं ही नहीं, आप कहीं आसमान में बैठे हैं, बहुत ऊपर किसी ऊंची फ्लाइट में उड़ रहे हैं। अब वहां से बैठकर बहनचोद सारे एक दूसरे का भविष्य देख रहे होते हैं कि अब क्या होने वाला है जिंदगी में। अच्छा, इसका इसके साथ सीन चल रहा है, ये उसकी बीवी के साथ गया हुआ था, बहनचोद इसकी बीवी तो लाहौर में बैठी हुई है, और देख इसका सीन क्या चल रहा है। और कभी कभी सोचते हैं कि यार ये बंदर हमसे पहले आए थे या हम बंदरों से पहले आए। और बंदर ऊपर बैठा हुआ सोच रहा होता है यार कैसी चूती है, केले भी खरीद कर खाते हैं बहनचोद। क्या सीन है इनका। हमारे बारे में सोच रहे हैं, अपने बारे में सोचो यार। कभी कभी सोचते हैं यार ये पेंसिल सीधी है लेकिन सेक्सी कितनी लग रही है। मतलब आप सोचे।
Hi, I'm a professor. And you know what is the best part about being a lecturer? You get free travels to all these conferences where you can discuss your research free of cost, free lunch, and some handsome professors to socialize with. And I realized something very interesting about myself. I just observe things when I want to. So, you know, when we were talking, I did not observe that he had a slit on his skin right off the cheek. But when he was blowing inside that plastic bag, I could see blood coming out of it. That was fun. I don't know what happened. Can't recall the missing bits. But this time I was so excited to go again to this meeting. But my boss says I'm ineligible. And I was really cross. So I asked one of my colleagues to get out of him why he thinks I'm ineligible. And you know what? The answer that my colleague tells me is that, according to my boss, I don't have a personality. That was depressing. That was very depressing. I mean, it was so depressing that I actually went to a doctor and confided into her about my professor, boss, thinking I don't have a personality. You know what she did? She put lots of electrodes in my head. It just ruined my hairstyle totally. But it was worth it because when she diagnosed, I actually have 3. Yeah.
Today I'm going to talk about men. So, have you guys ever noticed that men who are between the ages of 20 to 25 are somehow, somewhere, always interested in women older than them? Like their mantra is, jitni experienced, utne maze. And at the very same time, their motto goes like, you know, you can teach me. Along the lines, and their slogan goes like, you know, I've always had a mommy, but I've never had a sugar mommy. As per my theory in life, I believe that there are 2 legal relationships in our society. Number 1, friendships. Number 2, marriage. But the boys who are younger than me have always offered me the gray area between these 2. So there are 5 steps. Let's have this imaginary exercise. Hypothetically speaking, what can go in that gray area? Let's see. So stage 1, we will talk about general things and the romance of general emojis will go on for at least 2 weeks. Step 2. Then you will start sending me your rickshaw ke piche likhi hui poetry just to prove your ishq for me, or for the lack of better words, your tharak. So poetry like, zalim palat ke dekh, tamanna hum bhi rakhte hain. Yeah, right. That will really have me smitten. Step 3. Sexting. Aaj kya pehna hai? Kab nahayi thi? I can imagine you here in my bistar. Pure, legit tharak on text messages where people in the WhatsApp headquarters are going to go bonkers. Number 4, the dates. That's where you would want to try to touch me here, there. Because COVID hai, cinema to ja nahi sakte. तुम्हारी बाइक पे ही काम चलाना पड़ेगा. और तुम ठहरे गरीब आशिक, गाड़ी तो होगी नहीं तुम्हारे पास. Stage 5. अल्लाह अल्लाह करके आएगा वो वक्त जब हम कहीं किसी कोने खोचे में कुछ कर सकेंगे और एक छोटी मोटी किस हो सकेगी, और उसके बाद तुम्हें पता चलेगा कि तुम कितने बैड किसर हो। और ये वो स्टेज है जहां मैं तुम्हें कह दूंगी टाटा बाय बाय। अब आप बताओ, मतलब किसके पास है इतना वक्त और कौन काटेगा इतनी ख्वारी टू फिगर आउट कि तुम कितने स्पाइनलेस हो। थैंक यू सो मच।
मुझे पर्सनली इस दुनिया में किसी चीज से प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, हर किसी को रहने का हक है, पर एक चीज है जो बिल्कुल भी इस दुनिया में एग्जिस्ट नहीं करनी चाहिए, वो है मच्छर। यार ठीक है, मुझे पर्सनल प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, मच्छरों से भी नहीं, उनको भी नहीं होगा, वो सिर्फ आपका खून इसलिए चूसते हैं क्योंकि उनको अपना एग्स रिप्रोड्यूस करने होते हैं। तो क्या करूं, मैं उनके लिए मर जाऊं? मसला ये है कि वो क्यों जिंदा रहना चाहते, उन्होंने क्या किया है सिवाय हमारा खून चूसने के और बीमारियां फैलाने, और क्या किया है? ऑलमोस्ट 3000 किस्म अकसाम है मच्छरों की, जिनमें से 200 काटते हैं, ठीक है 200 काटते हैं, लेकिन मैं उनसे भी नफरत करती हूँ, बाकी के 2800 से। मुझे सिर्फ एक इख्तलाफ है, ये है कि ठीक है आपने काटना है ना, आप आए काटें और जाएं। नहीं, आप आएंगे, आप आप रात को इमेजिन करें, आधी रात को उठ के अपने मुंह पे बस लिटरली थप्पड़े मारते हैं, हद कर दिया। मतलब मेरे लिए इस दुनिया में मतलब सबसे जो ग्रेटेस्ट इन्वेंशन है वो मच्छरों का बैट।
I'm a bit frustrated because I come home, I cook, I clean, I pay the damn bills. I'm practically the backbone of this family. Oh, by the way, I live alone. The thing about being an independent woman is I feel like I have it all. Like I have everything. I can buy myself whatever I want. I can go wherever I want. The fanciest shit. I don't have to wait for no man. I'm the best. But then it's that one jar. That's where the challenge comes in, and I'm constantly having an existential crisis. I open the damn jar and I'm thinking, okay, I'll open it now, time to cook, but I can't do it. One spin, oh, I should have listened to my mother. Not open. Second spin, I'm going to die alone. Third spin, they'll find my body with my cat having half eaten it. It's stressful. I tell you that. It's fruitful, but it's stressful. The kind of shit I have to do for myself all the time. I have to take care of myself. So I mean, sometimes I'll order things, sometimes the bell will ring. And being the millennial that I am, I'm too scared to answer the door. For all I know, it's a serial killer. It's scary, guys. It really is. They're like, you're going to feel less stressed out if you have somebody with you. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can do it. I can try. So I get a cat. I cuddle with her every night. It's the best relationship. It's a bit toxic. She scratches me everywhere and everything.
So the good news is that after a stagnant 2 to 3% growth in economy, I mean the constant 2 to 3% growth in economy, Pakistan has now become independent in making memes. So for every good or bad thing, we have a meme ready in seconds. So let me share an example. During the recent power breakdown that we all faced, Pakistanis posted around 1.6 million memes in just 1 second. Imagine how productive have we become? So I hope the economists start counting it towards the GDP, which is the gross domestic product. And if that happens, I would be the most happiest person on earth, because I would have a practical examples to give to my economics students. So the breakdown reminds me of some funny memes that I came across. So someone termed the reason for breakdown as the fault in our cars. The other one termed, the other one explained it as coo, 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 the famous Khalnayak song that was picturized on Madhuri. Yeah, it was the sound of the boots he meant, not the sound of the bird. And the funniest one that I liked the most was that the whole country is tripping. So we all know that we all love our heritage so much. So we have our national heroes, our national flower, our national animals, national park that we just learned and rarely see. With the rapid changes in social media and availability of internet, we now have a national comment. Any guesses on that? So the national comment that we have in place is nice pic, dear. So this is the comment that I get from 20 of my friends on every picture that I post on Facebook.
These days, I've been thinking a lot about myself lately, because that's what self-obsessed people who think they are funny enough to make other people laugh do. Russell Peters कौन है मेरे सामने? उसके तो सर पे बाल भी नहीं है. My comic hero is Mr. Bean. He's the most famous electrical engineer you know. Yes, he has a degree in electrical engineering. Guess who else has a degree in electrical engineering? You're Miss Marvelous, Rhythm. Mr. Bean and I actually have a lot in common. We both couldn't find jobs as electrical engineers after graduating because the electrical engineering job market was taken over by Aima Beg. क्योंकि उसके अंग अंग में बिजली भरी है और मेरे अंग अंग में बिजली भरी है. So something which Mr. Bean doesn't have but I do. I have a master's degree in artificial intelligence, not the real intelligence, the artificial one, because apparently you cannot teach real intelligence to real people. You have to be born unlucky to be the most intelligent, aka the most hated person in the classroom.
Oh.
Mr. Bean and I are also both very private people. We don't talk a lot to other people. But when people try to make small talk with me and ask questions like, oh, where have you come from? I say, my mom's belly. And when they say, oh, what do you do for a living? I say, my best. I'm doing my best for a living.
So it was my birthday last night and I wrote a little set about birthday. So I feel like birthdays are a very unique experience for somebody whose birthday it is, because you get a lot of uninvited attention from everywhere. It seems like people wake up from the dead just to wish you on your birthday on Facebook and leave an HBD on your wall. You know, I hate these people. I have nothing against these people because I know they're lazy. All I know is that when they die, I'm going to leave an RIP on their wall. And not in Inna Lillahi wa Inna Ilaihi Raji'un, because first of all, I don't know how to write that. I'm always copy pasting from the comment above. Because 2000s mein, there was an economic growth in China and suddenly we started getting all these Chinese mal and Chinese toys. So mere parents ne mujhe kabhi toys ke liye nahi tarsaya. I had every China toy. And then I was the generation which was lucky enough to have a cell phone, because the generation before us who really relied on MIRC are kind of fucked up. But I'm so glad I had a cell phone, so meri jawani bach gayi. But you know, my mother tells us that, you know, talking to the boyfriends or guys at that time was so difficult at that time, because there used to be only one phone in the house. वो भी कहीं center में lobby में पड़ा हुआ है. And how they used to talk to the guys is they used to stay back from dawats. कि वो घर पे कोई नहीं होगा तो तब लड़कों से बात करेंगे. तो मेरी नानों को एक दिन दफा शक हो गया कि ये दोनों पीछे यही हरकतें करती हैं. So what she did was she opened the phone, she took out the receiving piece जिसमें आपको आवाज आती है, and she put it in her purse and she left. मतलब नानों ने इंजीनियरिंग वाली हरामीपना किया है बच्चों. अगर थोड़ा उससे पीछे चला जाएं, the things that lovers had to do to communicate was they used pigeons for communication. I mean, just what is the guarantee that pigeon is not gonna die coming from one city to another city? I mean, and what's the guarantee the message is not gonna get changed? Because you know how it is, बात क्या बन जाती है, like a Chinese whisper. तो क्या गारंटी है कि लवर ने वहां से भेजा एक नोट और पहुंचते पहुंचते वो चेंज ना हो जाए? क्या पता उसने भेजा हो HBD और पहुंचते पहुंचते वो RIP बन जाए.
सोचती मैं रहती हूँ पर होता मुझसे कुछ नहीं, सोचती मैं रहती हूँ पर होता मुझसे कुछ नहीं, बड़े बड़े ख्वाब मेरे छोटी सी आंखों में, बड़े बड़े ख्वाब मेरे छोटी सी आंखों में, कहने को तो दोस्त है मेरे पर सबसे कमीने हैं, कहने को तो दोस्त है मेरे पर सबसे कमीने, कहने को है दोस्त मेरे पर सबसे कमीने हैं, मेरी बातें सुन के मुझ पर ही हंसते हैं, कहने को तो दोस्त है मेरे पर सबसे कमीने हैं, बातें मेरी सुन के मुझ पर ही हंसते हैं, सोचती मैं रहती हूँ पर होता मुझसे कुछ नहीं, गाना आता नहीं पर फिर भी गा रही हूँ मैं, गाना आता नहीं पर फिर भी गा रही हूँ, गाना आता नहीं पर फिर भी गा रही हूँ, सबको रुला के रॉक स्टार बन रही हूँ, गाना आता नहीं फिर भी गा रही हूँ मैं, सबको रुला के मैं रॉक स्टार बन रही हूँ, सोचती मैं रहती हूँ पर होता मुझसे कुछ नहीं, सोचती मैं रहती हूँ पर होता मुझसे कुछ नहीं, बड़े बड़े ख्वाब मेरे छोटी सी आंखों में, बड़े बड़े ख्वाब मेरे छोटी सी आंखों में,
All right, everybody. Woo. We've come to the end of a whirlwind weekend, and now we have a power-packed start to the week. Thank you so much for joining us. And with the end of this festival as well, we thank you all for your support, for participating, for turning up, for signing up for our workshops, interacting with us, writing letters, getting your children involved. We are also at the end of Women's Day celebrations, protests, campaigns that are happening across the world, including Pakistan. And these events will go down in history as the beginning of change for the better for women around the world. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, but your participation means everything. जब आप फैसला करते हैं कि आपने हमारे साथ पार्टिसिपेट करना है, हमारे वर्कशॉप्स में हिस्सा लेना है, अपने ओपिनियंस हमारे साथ शेयर करने हैं. So many women came out and spoke about how they felt, the experiences that they've been through, the life-altering experiences, trauma, difficulties that they struggle with on a daily basis. They make a window for a lot of women unknowingly. They hear their stories and they can relate to them, especially women who do not have access to the life you and I perhaps do. बहुत सारे लोग जिनको ये बातें सुनने की ज़रूरत है, they get online and they have access to festivals like this, protests again, campaigns for women. And the more the conversation keeps going, the better your understanding gets. At least that's how I began in my life. When I was much younger, I didn't understand my own rights, what my abilities were, what my capabilities were. Was I really an equal in this society of ours? But when I heard other women, stronger women, powerful women, women I look up to speaking for things, I realized that I have these people to look up to and I'm going to follow their cue because they've given me that road. They've paved the road and I'm going to walk on this path much more easily. So every time you speak up, you're making it easier for somebody else to get up and say, I too have rights and I can fight for it and I can live my dreams on my terms. And how beautiful is that? You give somebody an inch of freedom that they have within themselves, but just don't realize it. So there you go. Everything, like I said, celebrations, Women's Day celebrations, protests, campaigns, this festival, it's all coming to an end, but the cause is very much alive. So stay true to it and keep the conversation going. Don't let it end with this festival. And, I've loved all the talks and discussions this year. I've been blown away by the topics. Like I said, women coming out and speaking about things I never thought I'd hear them speak about. Confidence ke saath aaye, har family se aaye, har ethnicity se aaye, har tabke se aaye, chote businesses promote hue, jo women led hain, single mothers, young girls who are talented, who are creative, उनके भी स्टॉल्स लगे, उनके सेल्स हुए, हमारे मार्केट प्लेस पे आप लोगों ने हमें ज्वाइन किया, उनकी बिजनेसेस को इनकरेज किया, अप्रिशिएट किया, and every time you spent money investing into them, you gave them hope, you gave them a reason to continue doing what they do. And mind you, I this year, as it is because of COVID, had decided that I'm going to invest my money in local brands and local businesses and see how it goes. We get these imported things from all over the world and we are very used to it. But what about that lady making local cheese? What about the honey that man is selling down the road? And these small businesses have turned out to be quite remarkable. So I say this with complete honesty because I've had first-hand experience that you give these small businesses a shot and you will be pleasantly surprised. You'll be giving back to your own people, specifically your own women, who need this sort of support in Pakistan today. साथ ही साथ बहुत सारी ladies ने बात की about their achievements in all their fields, जहाँ agriculture की बात हो रही थी, business की बात हो रही थी, arts and crafts की बात हो रही थी, entertainment, doctors, lawyers, politicians, this and that, they've all been on this platform, right? So there have been some really big highlights and they have excelled in so many fields, which makes me understand that it's all up here. There's nothing you can't do. And that's what's being proven now as more and more women are climbing mountains, flying planes, joining the armed forces, etc., etc. And of course, not to forget those performances, the dances, the songs that were absolutely amazing, but also the amazing comedic talent that we saw. And of course, not to forget, dramatic performance, Meenu. That was absolutely fantastic. So it almost seems like we have come full circle, right? We started with Wajiha Naqvi's beautiful performance in her local regional languages from South Asia. तो हमारी जो अपनी एक आइडेंटिटी है वो एक हद तक उजागर हुई, हमें एक familiarity मिली और हमें मजा भी आया because we were like, wow, this is a presentation of a contemporary, world music and it's still local, which is just so very special. So many talented people. And then now we are also going to end with Rebecca Chesney, who presents women's experience of COVID-19 from across the globe. एक connection बने औरतों के बीच में, no matter where they are in the world. क्योंकि आप जहाँ भी देखें, ठीक है, problems अपने आप को localize करती हैं, लेकिन अगर आप एक, थोड़ा सा zoom out करें and notice करें, our problems in the bigger picture are very, very similar around the world today. As the world becomes smaller, our problems become similar. And they are struggling, and they're struggling across the world. And that is why things like this really help us move forward. So I'm guessing Rebecca's session is also going to be worth watching because, again, we will connect with women from around the world who will discuss what they have been going through during this pandemic and how they have coped. And come this far. And who says women aren't funny? Now, you mentioned the comedic talent earlier, but I'm going to give them a special shout out again because these girls are absolutely hilarious. And I can't wait to see what the participants of Radical Comedy Karachi come up with next. It's amazing to see them as comedians. They have a sense of humor, they touch upon topics. And when they say something absolutely, funny, you're like, oh my God, did she just say that? And that's amazing because that's why you show how empowered they are, how easy they are in their own skin, how confident they are. They touch upon topics and they move forward. So special shout out to all these ladies. A job indeed very, very well done. And then there was Misha Shafi's electric performance. Love that track, love her energy, love her look. So confident and easy in her skin, which was quite nice. And from there, we went straight on to Bhangra. And now you know that Bhangra actually transcends borders, cultures, and time. You know, no matter where you go in the world, that tune comes on and you're like, yes, I can relate to this. So the girls of Eternal Tal are amazing. They were drumming their way up and now they're breaking the glass ceiling and proving that women can truly do anything they set their minds and hearts onto. And with a little bit of support from their families, from other women, men, it really does become possible to do whatever you dream of. This festival was just not for women. It's for children, it's for men, for everybody who knows a woman, is married to a woman, is a son, is a father to a beautiful woman, just to make people across the globe understand, irrespective of their gender, that this is what women are all about, this is what they deserve, this is what they need, and they have a right to be heard. So I'm thankful to all those people who are not women, but have still logged on and learned something, supported the cause, and been on board with us through the course of these last 4 days. And I'm sure कि आप लोगों ने हमारा छोटू ऐप जो बच्चों के लिए है उसको भी डाउनलोड किया होगा, उसको बहुत एंजॉय किया होगा. बच्चों के लिए बहुत सारी गेम्स थी उसमें, इंटरैक्टिव गेम्स थी, स्टोरीज थे, कुछ नरेशंस थी, तो उस पे भी यकीनन एक बहुत ही अच्छा इम्पैक्ट पड़ा है ऑन द चिल्ड्रन एंड अडल्ट्स अलाइक, बिकॉज उस पर काफ़ी इंटरैक्टिव गेम्स भी थी जो आप अपने बच्चों के साथ भी उसमें मिलकर पार्टिसिपेट कर सकें. साथ ही साथ आई एम श्योर यू ऑल्सो डाउनलोडेड talking about, which is Ek Khat Tumhare Naam, because we got a lovely response to all those letters. They were so very special. And not to forget that Wow Pakistan 2021 curators will be getting in touch with you guys who participated. You all are the lucky participants who have won the prizes for the best replies. So keep your phones handy in case they ring, क्योंकि phone कभी भी बज सकता है, तो उसका volume high कर दें and just keep waiting and going, I hope it's me. And of course, I'm forever grateful for all those people who participated in our movement, in our campaign called We Are Wow, because we truly are wow. And you sent in your pictures with your wow and a star, and you participated. And now the mural is almost ready. So people from all over Pakistan participated, and even those away from home sent us pictures. So thank you so much for sending us your pictures. I've said this in the past and I'll say it again. Together, these pictures are going to speak volumes to people who need that encouragement, who need that push, who need to just step out of their comfort zone and live their dream knowing that, hey, you're a wow star, right? So we've got your back. So it's been a great experience, and we've got the mural ready. Many, many, many of you participated, and we have created something absolutely fantastic, and I cannot wait to share it with you guys. So I'm very excited. The theme for this year was Unmask, and I'm about to unmask the final digital mural. So thank you so much once again for being part of the Wow Festival Pakistan 2021. I'm going to do a bit of a countdown, so there's excitement. All of our pictures are there. And again, people from around the world have participated. They've used the hashtags. And each and every person who has participated has done his and her part to make a difference. So yes, thank you for your effort. Thank you for the picture. And our mural is just about ready. So अब time है कि mural को reveal किया जाए और आप लोगों ने इस movement में participate किया और इंशाल्लाह हम इसको आगे भी लेके चलेंगे. तो मैं एक छोटा सा countdown करूँगी. 10 से नहीं. I think I'm going to start from 3. ठीक है? Let's go. So 3 and a 2 and a 1. And what do we have? Here you go. And of course, together we have enjoyed so many critical conversations led by inspiring women leaders from around the globe, from how to end gender violence, to how to adapt our fashion retail habits, which is the need of the hour, to care for people and this precious planet that we call home, right? And yeah, there's been talk across the board about everything that is relevant in today's time. So I loved hearing these amazing speakers. Special shout out to all those kidpreneurs. They were future business leaders and they taught me so much as well. And I was quite impressed. I was like, look at their age and look at what they're saying. They're ahead of their times, or maybe I am now from another generation, but they truly were inspiring and said so many beautiful things. Let's not forget, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, that with the pandemic, a lot of girls have had to drop out of school. School की fees नहीं भरी जा रही, school खुले ही नहीं तो जाया नहीं जा रहा. As it is, एक हद तक a lot of us believe कि लड़कियों को इतनी education के बाद education की ज़रूरत ही नहीं है, क्योंकि उनके शादी की ज़रूरत है, उनको घर बसाने की ज़रूरत है. ये सारे conversations पे हमने touch किया, लेकिन इसमें से एक चीज़ जो ज़रूर बाहर निकल कर आई वो ये है कि girls have suffered because of this pandemic, especially those young girls whose only outlet perhaps is going to school, learning something. They have it in them, right? And they've been deprived of that. And hence, it's led to a bunch of other negative things. Early marriages, उनको काम पे डाल देना, उनको नौकरी के लिए भेज देना, कि भाई काम करो, चाहे तुम्हारी उम्र जितनी भी छोटी हो, क्योंकि अब पैसे कमाने हैं, पैसा घर लाना है, घर भी तो चलाना है. And these are valid reasons. They're very valid. But this is why it's important to have these conversations. कि ये valid reasons तो हैं, लेकिन अब हम इसके through navigate करके बेहतरी की तरफ इन लड़कियों के साथ कैसे निकलेंगे. And I think the flag bearer for education is the one and only Malala Yousafzai, and she joined us on this festival. And I was so proud and so excited because she's known the struggle, she's fought for education, and today she represents Pakistan globally. She's not just fighting for girls in our villages and our homes, but girls across the world who deserve better lives and education. That is their basic right. So she's been a great representation, and it was an honor to have her on board and hear her speak and share her thoughts about women's rights and where their future is going in terms of their education and their prosperity. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end this session for today. Actually, I'm going to end the festival with a very, very profound quote by the one and the only Maya Angelou. Each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women. Keep that in your mind and have a fantastic year, because we'll see you exactly a year from now. Till then, take care of yourself and keep empowering each other. Goodbye.
I'm feeling okay.
but I am conscious that I have been very, very unproductive with my work, and that trying to concentrate on in-depth reading and critical analysis has been very, very difficult. And that may be a combination of a number of factors. I'm out of practice. I am feeling I'm able to concentrate because of the fact that my routine is very much home tied, and I think not being able to see my mum and to see my brother and not being able to hug them, laugh with them, eat a meal with them makes me feel quite sad.
La verdad es que la contingencia sanitaria por el coronavirus para mí ha sido más beneficio, porque afortunadamente yo tuve el privilegio de que me mandaron a trabajar desde casa y con el sueldo íntegro, entonces por lo menos esa parte no fue una preocupación para mí. Y en estos días he podido manejar mejor mi tiempo, dedicarlo más a mi familia, a proyectos personales, actividades personales que tenía mucho tiempo posponiendo, etcétera. Igualmente me he acercado con mi gente, con mis seres queridos, porque pues nos tenemos que tratar y tenemos que resolver cosas juntos ahora sí o sí, y en ese sentido ha sido cómodo. Sin embargo, también ha aumentado mucho mi ansiedad. Soy muy consciente de que mi situación no es la misma de todas las personas. Me angustia mucho sobre todo lo que pueda significar económica y socialmente a nivel ciudad, a nivel país, a nivel mundo. Esas son mis preocupaciones más grandes.
A significant change for me has been moving to teaching online. I now see my students several times a week via Zoom, and I feel like I'm running a one-woman TV show from my apartment. Although I'm talking to people all week, though, I'm very physically isolated. It's been a month since I've touched another person. My hope for the future is that we will take these lessons in solidarity and cooperation and apply them to the future challenges that we will inevitably face.
तकरीबन 50 दिन होने वाले हैं कि हम लॉकडाउन में हैं, सेल्फ आइसोलेट कर रहे हैं। कितने सारे नए लफ्ज़ आ गए हमको। इस वक्त में बाहर जाते हुए डर लगता है, बच्चों को घर रखते हुए घबराहट होती है। वो महीने से ज़्यादा हो गया है, किसी से नहीं मिले सिवाय घर वालों के, या अगर घर पे कोई आ जाए गलती से, और वो भी दूर दूर से, और इस बात से परेशान हो के कि माँ क्यों घबराती है अगर हम किसी आने वाले से मिलते हैं, जबकि पहले कहती थी आगे हो, सलाम करो, मिलो, हगी दो। अब कुछ भी नहीं। कैसी अजीब सी दुनिया हो गई है जिसमें बाहर जाते हुए डर लगता है, किसी के आते हुए डर लगता है, किसी से मिलते हुए डर लगता है, कुछ लेते हुए डर लगता है, चीज़ें मल मल के, साफ कर कर के, स्प्रे कर कर के, दुआएं पढ़ पढ़ के, एक अजीब सा बोझ जैसा है ज़हन पे, और आगे पता नहीं क्या होगा।
On March 11th, my husband returned from New York City. By March 14th, we were both sick. I was concerned that it was COVID-19 because this felt different. A few days passed and my husband received a call that 2 people he worked with tested positive. We're still feeling sick, so we called the 211 number on March 17th. It was no help at all. They told us that we didn't qualify for testing and to go to the hospital if we couldn't breathe. We both looked at each other and said, we're going into this alone. My biggest concerns are the opening of some businesses, causing more people getting sick and a lot of people dying. Being sick from COVID-19 was one of the worst experiences in my life. When laying down sick and it's hard to breathe, I asked myself, what is going to happen to me and my husband? I still ask that question. It left me traumatized. I want people to take this seriously. I wouldn't want other people to feel the uncertainty of this sickness.
I can't see my friends. Yeah, and I'm missing school, and I'm missing out on having the best teacher. And it was my first man teacher. I'm enjoying being at home, spending time with my family and playing together. I hope to go back to school before September. Yeah, I hope it never ever happens again. I hope none of my family die. I don't want to catch it and go to hospital. I'm scared of my mummy going to the shops.
Coronavirusul m-a scos din rutină. Lucrez în cercetare, în ecologie și protecția mediului. Planurile mele din acest an au fost date peste cap. Ieșirile în teren au fost oprite. Lucrez de acasă, dar am nevoie de deplasări în afara localității, de întâlniri cu colegii din țară și străinătate. Acasă petrec mai mult timp cu familia. Fac lucruri pentru care nu am avut timp înainte. Dar teama de boală, de incertitudine, de nesiguranță mă face neplăcută și taciturnă pentru cei din casă. Dar atâta vreme cât familia mea este bine și eu sunt sănătoasă, voi face față provocărilor viitorului.
I live in a rural area of Ireland down in West Cork, so I guess in a way it's almost surreal what's going on outside because I work from home. I don't see people from day to day. So that's been the biggest thing for me is not being able to go out and meet friends and family. I also have a stall at a market every weekend and that's been cancelled, so my income has dropped right off. So yeah, the physical contact with friends and family is the biggest thing for me. We have a garden, so I can get out and work in that and walk the dogs. So from that point of view, I'm very glad that we live where we do. I couldn't imagine being in the middle of a city. I hope people will slow down and take a good look at their lives and realise it's not all about money and that we need to protect the environment that we live in and that we share this planet with a lot of other creatures. It's not all about people. And we need to think about the community. It's not just me, me, me.
Ich habe diesen Winter noch einmal eine Saison im elterlichen Gastronomiebetrieb in Österreich mitgeholfen. Hier in der Region ist Tourismus die Haupterwerbsquelle. Die Saison bis März war gut, dann kam Corona. Mit so einem schnellen Saisonende hatte wohl keiner gerechnet. Das Virus aus China war für uns so weit weg und auf einmal so nah und legte gefühlt von heute auf morgen den gesamten Ski-, Gastronomie- und Hotelbetrieb lahm. Seit 16. März gelten Ausgangsbeschränkungen. Ein paar Tage danach war das Tal unter Quarantäne. Keiner durfte rein, keiner raus. Von 100 auf 0. Natürlich war das für viele ein großer Schock. Gerade in unserer Branche ist die Unsicherheit groß. Viele Unternehmen bangen um ihre Existenz und viele Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeiter um ihre Arbeitsstelle. Diese Situation hat uns alle wieder mal auf den Boden der Tatsachen geholt und gezeigt, dass vieles nicht selbstverständlich ist. Vielleicht bewirkt gerade das ein Umdenken. Vieles wird wieder mehr geschätzt und macht auch einiges auf einmal möglich, was vorher schwer umgesetzt wurde. Weniger Flugverkehr und Schiffreisen zum Beispiel. Klima und Natur haben tatsächlich die Möglichkeit, sich gerade zu erholen. Auch viele Firmen müssen umdenken. Vor Ort und regional gewinnt wieder an Bedeutung. Schön wäre, wenn diese Denkansätze auch nach der Krise noch bestehen bleiben. Corona wird vorübergehen und vieles verändern. Hoffentlich auch viel zum Guten.
Well, I miss my family the most. Absolutely miss my family. I miss you so much and all kinds of things, but I do miss you not being able to come in and that hug and touch and the freedom to go out, you know.
Pensando al futuro ancora più di prima, è chiaro come in realtà il futuro non esiste, cioè
Sì.
lo possiamo solo fare noi.
Sì,
E
infatti.
questa cosa da questo punto di vista è una bella botta narcisistica nei confronti del fatto che pensiamo di poter controllare le cose.
Sì. Senti, ma tu personalmente che cosa speri a livello personale, che sia lavorativo o di, non lo so, di
Ma io in
salute?
questo momento già sto vivendo un po' in una situazione completamente diversa, quindi le speranze possono essere quelle di continuare a reagire in maniera così flessibile, nonostante il fatto che io non sia giovanissima, quindi per esempio a livello lavorativo, anche se all'inizio è stato abbastanza scioccante i primi giorni in cui ho dovuto comunque cambiare completamente la modalità di espressione, la modalità di comunicazione, da corsi fatti in presenza a corsi fatti su piattaforma, è stato qualcosa che un po' i primi giorni comunque era abbastanza...
Assolutamente sì, per tutte credo che sia, ma anche per me sono stata abbastanza abituata perché già lavoravo un po' da casa, quindi questa cosa insomma non mi ha sconvolto più di tanto.
No? Però quando tu hai un'aula con 25 persone, trasferirla su piattaforma.
On a personal level, I am experiencing the joys and the associated stress of living with and caring for my 85-year-old dad. I never had to do this until now. I'm also getting used to virtual meetings via Zoom and others. But perhaps for me, the greatest benefit of this lockdown is the opportunity to advance my book writing and TV series projects. My greatest concern for the future stem from the impending global recession, the impact it would have on businesses, especially the medium-scale businesses, and the ultimate impoverishment of the masses of our country. This is likely to place serious challenges on safety and security unless there is a concerted effort by the government and the business community to forestall these dangers. On a positive note, I hope there will be improved work-life balance as many companies will consider flexible working arrangements post-COVID-19 lockdown. Bye-bye.
I feel that it puts the simple things we take for granted into perspective, like going for a long walk and visiting family and friends whenever we want. My concerns for the future are safety rules being relaxed too soon and people thinking it's okay to go back to how we lived before, which could knock us back to escalating infections and having to start from scratch with isolation and social distancing. My worry is that when things do go back to some sort of normality and businesses start to reopen again, it'll be all too easy to revert back to old habits. I feel constant reminders should be made about awareness to cleanliness. I'm sure some people will think that because they've escaped the virus, it'll make them immune.
Und man kann nicht auf den Markt und zum Friseur und es findet keine Gymnastik statt und keine Ausfahrten mit dem Roten Kreuz und dann bin ich besorgt um meine Gesundheit. Und nach Corona freue ich mich aufs Einkehren und dass man wieder Bekannte treffen kann und vielleicht werden die Leute genügsamer.
¿Cómo me está afectando personalmente el coronavirus? Thought I found a way, yeah, but you never go away, so I guess I gotta stay now. ¿Cuál es mi mayor deseo para el futuro? Oh, I hope someday I'll make it out of here, even if it takes all night or 100 years. Need a place to hide, but I can't find one near. ¿Cuál es mi mayor preocupación para el futuro? Wanna feel alive outside, I can fight my fear. Isn't it lovely all alone? Heart made of glass, my mind of stone. Tear me to pieces, skin and bone. Hello, welcome.
My father died in a nursing home in Manhattan from COVID-19 related pneumonia. He was in palliative care, but the COVID pneumonia really hastened his death. And of course, we were unable to see him. And up until the time that the nursing home shut down, I had been seeing him quite regularly, at least 5 times a week.
And that was hard for me because I hadn't seen him in a really long time. And then I've just been so disconnected from the grieving process because of this. And I think maybe you have too.
Yes, I have. And, I'm just concerned that we know that so many more people are going to die.
I was redeployed to be part of the education faculty to train staff that would be working in NHS Nightingale London. My experience has been totally different to most of my family and friends. I've been working 12-hour days to design, plan and implement the training. I'm lucky still going to work, being challenged and interacting with people. And I'm so tired on days off, I don't want to go out. The biggest thing I miss is hugging people. It's so alien not to be able to do that. I'm worried about friends and family, but everyone's healthy and coping well.
Bevor Coronavirus hatte ich eine wahnsinnig stressige Zeit, muss ich echt sagen. Jetzt plötzlich, also es sind insgesamt 5 Ausstellungen ausgefallen, verschoben. Vieles ist unsicher, ob es überhaupt stattfinden wird oder ob es nachgeholt wird. Ist es plötzlich unheimlich ruhig. Einerseits ist es natürlich total furchtbar. Man ist irgendwie aus seinem Lebensfluss herausgeworfen. Aber andererseits ist es irgendwie auch sehr ruhig und man hat Zeit und Muße, endlich mal zur Besinnung zu kommen und nachzudenken. Und es gehen einem natürlich die Sachen ab, dass man Freunde nicht treffen kann oder verschiedene Veranstaltungen nicht besuchen kann.
Literally any second now, I could have my first baby girl. So I'm 9 months in, and she could pop out any moment now. And I feel like coronavirus has brought a lot of different things into this world in terms of thinking and in terms of our approaches for things, as well as obviously some concerns in the sense that it's not going to happen as I wanted it to be. Obviously, you have the social aspect of when you bring in a new member of the family. You have this sense of community and everyone coming to visit you and prepare food, and you can visit family and friends, and everyone are so eager and keen to meet this new baby girl that joined into your lives. And that won't happen, obviously, in my case, not at the moment, not for the foreseeable future. And I feel like some of the things that it has taught me is to feel blessed because this is what I have. Even though I had many plans and many things that I wanted to do with her during the first couple of weeks with family and friends, I just need to accept that and embrace the situation and be thankful for what I've got and not for what I can't. So this is kind of my view and take on coronavirus,
Alors le coronavirus, pour moi, tout au début, c'était la possibilité, avec le confinement, de lire, de me poser, de réfléchir à des projets que je voulais faire depuis très longtemps. Et puis j'ai été malade, et puis surtout, mes 2 parents ont été malades, et mon père est mort. Alors, le coronavirus a provoqué pour moi un temps de terrible bouleversement. Au-delà de cette expérience terrible, le temps de confinement, à cause du coronavirus, a permis, je crois, pour beaucoup, pour moi aussi, malgré tout, de trouver en soi, à l'intérieur de soi, les ressources nécessaires pour marcher, pour avancer, pour vivre. Et de savoir reconnaître aussi dans la vie de tous les jours ce qui est essentiel. et d'avancer, de vivre en fonction de cet essentiel. Alors maintenant, j'espère infiniment que ces transformations intérieures, peut-être chez chacun de nous, soient assez fortes pour basculer vers un changement de société. En fait, il faudrait un plan de transformation de notre société, pas un plan de reprise. Voilà, c'est mon grand souhait, un changement de société pour enfin prendre en compte le climat qui change et toutes les possibilités que nous avons pour nous y adapter. Voilà.
Yo, mogala makapa banna ba kae. Re tlhasetswe ke mantitane ga o re lome wa re tetemetsa. Mantitane o sa bonweng ka matlho mantshonyane se tlhola lefu. E kete o ka bo bonwa ka matlho ka go ritela ka monwana wa swa o sa laela setšhaba sa bolokega. Re utlwile selelo se tswa kwa China ra se ikgatholosa. Re itlhoma se tla felela ko jaaka merwalela le thoroma. Nte kwane ke lebelo la neeletsano le tla re fitlhelela. La iphetola sesipidi bolwetse bo kekang le mmele otlhe. Ntlha le kankere e botoka ka e setlhogo mme ga e fetele. Re fa gare ga ntwa ya boraro ya lefatshe. Ntwa e sa loweng ke batlhabani re ba bone re tshabe. Re lwa le sepoko se a re bona rona ga re se bone. Se re keketa jaaka makeke a keketa lefelo bosigo jotlhe. Mme e re bosa-bosa bo go setse kutwana fela go tlhoboga. Botlhogo dithata fa ba leba ba bona mantlwane a banyana. Batho ba utlwang ka letlalo jaaka tumuga e bodipa. Mme e tla re o ba wela modula wa coronavirus. Ba fetetse ba ba senang molato ba ba tshwaetse. Magatla pa ipolokeng ga bo boi ga go lediwa ga bo mogare. Twatsi ya corona ga e tshabe ope se ikaketseng. Bangwe ba re ke ya bagodi batho ba disukiri le dikgatelelo tsa madi. Mme kana e phamola lesea e phamole mošwa mogodi a falole. Botlhe ba ba fodileng ba dule ka lesoba la mogodu. E ka kgona ba phatlalatse maitemogelo a bona gore botoma se batle ba dumele. Tlogelang go reetsa borramaka, tlogelang bo mmamaka. Tlogelang go sela dimmeko mo mmileng jaaka banyana. Ntswa le itse kwa tshedimosetso ya nnete le ka e bonang gone. Ba tla lo latlha, ba tla lo faposa tseleng ya nnete. Ba le wetsa ka mosima motlhaela thupa la tlhoka le go ikwatlhaya. Morwa Ramaphosa o e lwele re go bone re utlwile re a leboga. Bothuntse be ba sa utlweng letsogo la molao le lelele. Ga le tshabe go phamola moseso o mosweu le o katele ka kgolegelo. Mme e tla re monyadiwa a opela I do. Ba bangwe ba opela tshwarelo ya dibetsaka. MaAforika Borwa a re ikokobetseng, a re iphutheng. Le a bona le lona di setse di ja maaparannkwe. Le bogo mo godimo ga le lengwe ba gaetsho re a leboga. Re leboge mapodisi, re leboge masole batho ba dirang bosigo le motshegare go leka go thusa setšhaba mo nakong e thata e. Baoki le dingaka ke tlhaela mafoko a tebogo le lwantwa e thata. Tau ya tlhame e le garola e le metsa ka mogoso mme ga le latlheliseditse ga le ineele. Bagwebi, mekgatlho le MaAforika Borwa otlhe a neelang ka botswapelo go thusa mo koduweng ga la lebalwa. Malebo. Morena boloka setšhaba sa hetso. O ripitla coronavirus ka letsogo la gago le le jang le le polosang. A rialo morwadi a moloisana a tla di a tselana.